everybody. I love that. Hello, everybody.
Oh, yeah, it's 1804.
Actually,
Hello.
it's 17:58 on my clock.
It's 05:39 on my clock. Oh no, that's
Huh?
Well, I've got this British computer, and it says 1804. So,
Oh, there you go.
17:58. There we go.
Yeah, 17:58 and 48 seconds.
That's the one.
That's what I'm using for the official time.
Sounds good to me.
Hello, everybody. Let's see.
Hi, folks.
hey, everyone.
Hey, everybody.
Where is it? Where is that window? Here it is. Okay. Oh, I need to get my single vision glasses on so I don't do this the whole time. The old man, progressive, bifocal, tilted head.
Yes.
You know, I still do that when I'm wearing single vision glasses. I find myself tilting my head back and I'm going, well, that's not going to help. It's the same.
The only problem I have is looking at the top panel. You've got to be able to tilt your head.
They need to have the bifocal like up there too.
Yeah. Otherwise, you end up tilting your head so far back you break your neck.
Yep. You fall
I
backwards.
don't have any of those issues yet. Thank God.
You will.
You don't have issues.
All right. Well, I always have issues, but I don't have the visual issue.
How old are
as
you,
yet.
Dana?
48.
Oh, you're good. You're lucky. You don't have to wear reading glasses at all.
Nothing.
Okay. Good for you.
You can't see, but he refuses to wear glasses.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm Helen Keller. Come on now.
We're over here, Dana.
It's
we're
not
over here.
important.
Oh, darn! I never realized you're that handsome.
What's interesting is when you put the corrective lenses on for the first time, and you go, "Holy crap!
Wait a minute.
Look at all those.
Look at all the
pores in
leaves
my
on the
face.
trees.
Look at these wrinkles in my forehead, and wow!
There's I can see you now, Sam.
Look.
Look through a really thick glass.
Look at the leaves on those trees. I didn't know those trees had such.
As long as you got that right there,
distinct
Dana, what's happening for me tomorrow? Could you look into that crystal ball and let me know?
Let's see. Mike is going to win $45 million.
Ooh.
Oh, good. I'm coming to
He's gonna-
Oshkosh.
He's,
All right.
And then
He's
the
go-
shot
he's
will
going
kill
to
him of a
meet
heart
the-
attack.
meet this unbelievably gorgeous, beautiful woman that's a model that's 40 years younger than you are.
It'll work.
How could that be possible? He's only 42.
Well, rocking the cradle. Just saying.
All right. No, I don't want to do that.
Right.
Hmm?
Drag that elsewhere.
Well,
That explains why I can't see taxiway signs.
that's yes.
No, I can
That's
see
important.
just fine. Just fine.
Or just keep on driving until you get some kind of response from your first officer. Where are you going? Huh? This way?
Huh?
Who?
Which way is that?
What are you talking about? Okay. Nice clear video from everyone today, according to our producer Liz. That's good.
Excellent.
And let me make sure. Yep, I have mine in the right setting. I guess we need to get our recorders recording.
Oh, golly, yes.
You can tell we're airline pilots. Unless we have a checklist in front of us, we forget to do things.
You just
I
we
have
forget-
a checklist in front of me. I forget to actually look at it.
You have to remember to read the checklist.
It's not in the right place. I need
The
it like
checklist for the checklist.
here in the center of my screen.
Yeah, but that blocks the camera stuff.
Oh, sorry.
Stop it.
But that's where I would see. Fine.
Okay, checklist.
Check.
Well,
Pre-show check.
push
Check.
notifications. Yeah, that happened a while ago.
Yeah.
Oh, you son of a...
That's-
Don't push it.
and then it just says recorders.
Too late. Okay. Record. My recorder's on.
Peter Palmer picked. Yes, ours is working.
I think we're in.
I think I'm golden. Golden.
You have the clapboard?
Clapboard.
He's got the
I-
clap, all right.
I took some penicillin and I lost it.
Michael looks unfazed. It's like, "Alright, whatever. It's your problem.
Good.
right.
Okay. Yeah, whatever.
Having one of these this time, Steph. Tessellation.
Oh, nice. I remember that one. It is good.
Test. No,
Tessellation.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Wait a minute.
But before I switch, I must clear my palette.
Get rid of some of these open
Oh,
applications.
of course, yes.
Dang it. I would have been a little bit better prepared, but I had to take a nap because the sign-in morning in Charleston was 4:15.
Ooh.
Ew.
Ouch.
Ooh.
Yeah. And you should have seen the two of us trying to stay awake on the
Cheers.
airplane up to
It's
Newark.
destination. Cheers.
Like just punching each other every once in a while. Like, hey,
Where are we?
wait.
Oh, that's good too.
Are we there yet?
Pretty much it. Okay.
Mm.
Okay. Let's do or clapping hands. Ready. 3, 2, 1.
That's in
Sounded
unison.
very in sync. Yeah.
That was actually.
That's because we're all in America.
Ah.
Even
Has anything
Micah.
to do with it.
Although
Yeah,
not
I
sure
wouldn't
about
call.
Micah.
I wouldn't call Maine America. So, fortunately, he's in an American city now.
Did you hear that?
Well, you know, Massachusetts, Maine was northern Massachusetts for the longest time.
Yeah. Yep. Redneck, Massachusetts.
And remember, mute is your friend. So if you're going to be doing things in the background when somebody else is talking,
Like
make sure you
eating.
remember to turn the mute on. And Micah and Nick, remember to lean in to the closer to the mic when you guys are saying something interesting. Oh, never mind. Then you won't have to worry
Yeah, I'll
about it.
never have to lean in.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Any other administrative items that we need to cover?
Yeah, if I press this mute button, does it make a noise?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I'll use the soft mute then.
Thank you. Okay. And I was going to use this, and then I was going to go over to news and kind of use that as a cheat sheet. Okay, let me do a sound check.
WAPG, it's the airline pilot guy.
Too loud, too soft, just right?
Perfecto.
I'm Radio Roger, and you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show.
That okay too?
Sound good to me.
Okay, I'm recording. That's there. I think that is going to work out just fine. Okay, here we go. Starting at 6:06. Wow, it's pretty quick. Here we go.
I'm Radio Roger, and you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show.
WAPG, it's the airline pilot guy.
Airline Pilot Guy, episode 357.
Yeah, he's up in the sky. It's the airline pilot guy.
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, the view from our side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 1A in the APG headquarters studios. Today's show is recorded on the 9th of January, 2019.
Yeah, he's up in the sky. It's the airline pilot guy. Picture light and he's flying by. With the airline pilot guy.
In today's show, a 737 stuck in Iran. Problem with main gear tires on an Aeromexico 737-800 in Guadalajara. A legendary airline CEO dies. That and more. Ah, shoot. Ran out of time. That's why I had to write this stuff down.
That'll help. Jade always helps.
Mm-hmm. Wet the whistle.
If I were you, I would drink heavily.
Thanks.
Okay.
I'm Radio Roger, and you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show.
WAPG, it's the airline pilot Guy.
Airline Pilot Guy, episode 357.
Yeah, he's up in the sky. It's the Airline Pilot Guy.
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy show, the view from our side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 1A in the Apg headquarters studios. Today's show was recorded on the 9th of January, 2019.
Yeah, he's up in the sky. It's the Airline Pilot Guy. Put your light and it's flying by. With the Airline Pilot Guy.
In today's show, a 737 MAX 8 stuck in Iran, a industry CEO legend, Herb Kelleher, dies, and a cockpit falls off an F-15 at 30,000 feet. That, more news, your feedback, and this week's Plane Tale, the Widowmakers. So get all settled in, tray tables and seat backs in their upright and locked positions. Electronic devices powered on. Flight 357 is ready for pushback. Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Hello.
The
You
cockpit
don't say anything
fell
yet.
off. What do you mean the cockpit fell off?
I'll have a can of peas, please.
Damn it. Did I say cockpit?
Yeah.
Yes.
Excuse me. Shoot.
Need more sleep. That's all. You're forgiven.
Okay, I know how to fix this.
In post.
That's actually the best thing.
Mhm.
Or I could always do a fall back on this one. Here we go. No. I'm not used to it. I got to do this first.
WAPG. It's the Airline Pilot Guy.
Airline Pilot Guy, episode 357.
Yeah, he's up in the sky. It's the Airline Pilot Guy.
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy show, the view from our side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 1A in the Apg headquarters studios. Today's show was recorded on the 9th of January, 2019.
Yeah, he's up in the sky. It's the Airline Pilot Guy. Put your light and it's flying by. With the Airline Pilot Guy.
In today's episode, aviation news and our commentary. More news, your feedback, and this week's Plane Tale, the Widowmakers. So get all settled in. Tray tables and seat backs in their upright and locked positions. Electronic devices powered on. Flight 357 is ready for pushback. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Airline Pilot Guy Show. It's an aviation podcast where, as I just mentioned, we're going to talk about aviation news that occurred between the last show and this one, and, of course, tackle your feedback as well as this week's installment of the Plane Tales. So, how is everybody doing? Steph?
Good.
Oh, this is where I go like this. And here to help me with all of that, because I need as much help as I can get, from her lakeside studio in South Carolina, a doctor, skydiver, marathon runner, strength training junkie, IPA connoisseur, and commercial multi-engine instrument-rated pilot, Dr. Steph.
I just thought we were switching things up tonight. A little bit different, mix up the format, shake things up a little bit.
Yeah, no, clearly...
It's all right. Well, we're here to help, Jeff. We are here to
thank
help.
you. I really need the help because I don't know what the heck I'm doing. It's like the first time I've ever done a podcast.
357 shows later.
Also joining us today from his mobile recording studio in Boston, Massachusetts, professional photographer, former RAF, RAAF fighter pilot, current captain for an international airport based in London, Captain Nick.
Hi, Jeff. Lovely to be back on the show. And despite all my efforts, I haven't found a single person in the city who pronounces it Boston.
Yeah, probably for good reason. And speaking of Boston, we have from a stately southern mansion in Smyrna, Georgia, barbecue master, motorcycle rider, boat skipper, and underwater photographer, and a captain for a major U.S. legacy carrier, Captain Dana.
Hey, everybody. Great to be back on another fantastic show. So, looking forward to a good one.
Yeah, we hope. We hope. Fingers crossed.
Always. Everyone's
And-
good.
Oh, wait a minute. We have some guest host music. I hear it in the background. Oh, singing right next to Captain Nick in Boston, Massachusetts. This is our main man, Micah, from the Pine Tree State. Right, Micah?
It's the Pine Tree State. It's also vacation land, but here I am in Boston. When I heard that Nick was going to be here, and he had a 2-day layover here in Boston, and that doesn't happen very often, and realizing that I haven't seen him since our time in Pittsburgh, I thought it was time to come down and visit.
Well, we're glad you did. And vacation land. Really?
That's what it says on our license
On
plate.
the license plate. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's a rare thing to see a main license plate down here, but it does on the very bottom.
It says vacation land. I always thought that when I write my book, I should call it I Work in Vacation Land.
And then everybody would think you're talking about Orlando, Florida, or something like that.
The happiest place in the world, or so they say.
Wally World. Isn't that what the... Oh, never mind.
Yeah, Wally World.
Okay.
Walt Disney, Wally.
Oh, no. What's the...
Yeah, that was National Lampoon
National
Vacation.
Lampoon Vacation, yeah. Okay. Well, hello, everyone. And again, welcome to our little aviation show. And Micah, as always great to see you. And I'm glad you made the trek down to Boston. How far of a drive is that? How long of a drive?
About 100 miles, and it was an easy drive. We had a little weather up in Portland, Maine, as we're apt to do, but it became beautiful when we got down here. But what was interesting, following the magenta line, when the GPS told me that I was here and I had arrived, I was inside a tunnel underground to Prudential Center someplace, and it says, "You've arrived at your destination." So I came out, not really knowing Boston particularly well, driving around, looking for the hotel, can't find it, make a couple of turns, asked about a dozen people, "Do you know where the Marriott is?" Nobody in Boston has any idea where it is. It was really interesting. But I finally got here, checked into the hotel, I'm at the front desk, and there's Captain Nick waiting for me. I should have just asked him.
Yeah. He would have told you where his hotel is.
Captain Nick's always, well, happy to tell you where to go.
Yes. That's
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a forte of mine.
So are New Yorkers, by the way.
It's true.
But we can't say exactly how they tell you where to go.
Different politeness levels, I think, involved.
Yes. Actually, that's not true. That's an unfair characterization of the fine folks from New York. And we're going to talk about some of these fine folks from New York shortly, because we had a little meetup up there. Or I did with some of those folks. Let's see. So Nick, since you're right there next to Micah, and he was just talking, so this might be a good time for you to talk as well. What have you been up to, sir?
Busy old world, isn't it? I had a couple of days free, went back on call. They called me not to give me a trip that day, but to tell me that I was on the Boston the next day, which actually was fine. I mean, not that I can refuse, but I thought, that'll be a good trip. 2 nights. Yeah, that'll be fantastic. Got a little note out in Slack. So just another good excuse to go and use another media outlet. So if you're not a slacker, then become one, because you might miss something. And had a nice, pleasant flight out here. It was forecast. It wasn't good. We got off on time. It wasn't due to be foggy till after midnight Zulu. But of course, we're an hour out, an hour before that, and it was already down a half a mile. And here's the question I'm just going to have to ask opposing bases. So I put up the ATIS, and it said they're on runway, I think it's 12 left.
In Boston?
15 left?
No, it must be 22 left.
22 left.
Okay, so that's a Cat 1 only. and the minima there is 3/4 mile visibility to make an approach, and they're giving weather at 1/2 mile, but they're giving ILSs to 2 left. So I'm looking at it going, hang on a minute, that's illegal. You can't fly an approach with a visibility that's out of limits. That's the one thing you can't do. So I got on to our ops and said, can you just check what runway Boston's using? Surely if they're down 1/2 mile, they should be using one of the Cat 3 approaches. So the other end of that runway is a Cat 3 runway. And what's more, that one's into wind, whereas landing on 2 left, you've got a 5-knot tailwind. So I fully expected them to come back, or they made a mistake. And the reply was, the FAA have said that they're landing on 2 left, and if you want to make an approach on the other end, it could cause significant delays. And I'm going, well, hang on a minute. So I'm still wondering
how's everybody else doing it?
Yeah, how they can promulgate an approach for a runway when the visibility is clearly out of limits. Anyway, when we got there, they were running ILSs for 2 left, and they were giving RVRs when I got onto the tower. And the RVRs were fine for the approach, so we made an approach. But we got the lights, the minimum at 216 feet. We got the lights at 230 feet. So literally I was on the edge of pushing the throttles forward when out of the gloom came some to the approach lights. And a little bit later, we got the full runway. But it really was scoshy. And I'm still scratching my head to work out why on earth Boston wouldn't have been using the other end of the runway where we could have done an auto land and where we wouldn't have to land with a 5-knot tailwind. So there you go.
Well, those guys aren't getting paid for the past month of work based on the government shutdown. So maybe they just decided we're going to do it this way.
Could be.
This is how we want to do it. Heck with it.
That's the way it's going to be.
No, I'm sure they had very good reason.
Dana.
Yeah, I'm waiting to find out. I hope.
I think Dana might have an answer.
RVS control and the reported visibility may actually be the tower visibility. So surface visibility may have been better. So if the RVRs are controlling, then that's what's going to, at least here in the United States, that's what will be the guidance. And I had the exact same scenario this past week, as a matter of fact, coming into Atlanta. The RVRs were greater than 6,000, but the tower was actually reporting a 1/2 mile. So
okay, so most other agencies, when that is the situation, they put on the ATIS the RVRs for the in-use runway. That they didn't. So my question is, if you're going to write an ATIS, make it something that it's useful for the pilot to read, so he can come in with confidence, knowing that the RVRs are actually acceptable, and he doesn't have to worry about making an illegal approach. So that would be my rejoiner.
All the major airports that I recall going to here in the States, Nick, they do not put the RVRs on the ATIS itself because they're changing so rapidly. So you wait until you're with approach control or tower, and then that's when they start telling you what the RVRs are.
Yeah, but if they're changing rapidly and they're still within limits, that's fine. If they're changing rapidly and going out of limits, you need to know. So my answer is I don't really need to know exactly what the RVR is. I need to know that it is likely to be within limits. So give me an RVR that shows me that I can conduct the approach legally, and then I'd be happy. But perhaps it's just because I'm an old curmudgeon.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with you, Jeff. The reality is that with it being controlling and it being such a thing that changes so frequently, they'd have to put out a brand new ATIS every time that changed.
Well, so it's not the way it works in Europe.
Well, you're not in Europe, sir.
You're not in Europe, sir. Welcome to Boston.
That's no excuse for slapdash behavior.
Well,
this is the way we do it here. This is the way we do it. All right. Well, I'm glad you had a great experience flying into Boston.
Welcome to Boston, Captain Nick.
Anything else you want to complain about before we move on?
Oh, no, there'll be plenty later.
Excellent. Yeah, don't waste it all now. Save some for.
Okay. Well, Dana, how have you been, sir?
Doing great. I did, since we're on this conversation about RVRs, I did actually, as first time, and I forgot to mention it last week, completely forgot about it. But last week I did my first auto land on the 88 as a captain. I think I've done 2 or 3 in my entire career as a first officer.
Mhm.
And I have only been flying with I've got 180 hours right now, and so I've already had to do my first auto land this past week. The
Well,
weather was
didn't you say something about doing an auto land or a Cat 2 auto land, and you were getting close to disconnecting it, but you let it land, and it was not a
Yeah.
great landing?
Yeah, but I did talk about it, but
Mhm.
what I didn't mention was it was my first one.
Oh, okay. It's the same one you were talking about.
Yeah, same one I'm talking
Same one.
about, but it was my first one.
Oh, okay.
So since the last show, not a whole lot's going on. I haven't flown since last week. So
Oh.
I go out. I'm off this entire week. Then I go out and I work 7 straight days, starting on Sunday. Which, by the way, under 117 you can do. Under one good old fashioned was 121 rules prior, you could never do that.
Yeah.
So you can fly far more, be more tired, and fly more days in a row.
Isn't that odd how that all happened?
Mm-hmm.
FAR 117 rules were supposed to make it where you had more rest, and now we're working more than we were and less rest.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't know. Doesn't make a lot of sense.
I've got about when I have my domicile, quite literally domicile layover, I basically have about 12 hours, a little over 12 hours. So that by the time you go ahead and get the employee bus, go to the employee parking lot, get in the car, drive home, then have to do the same thing coming back, you don't even get 8 hours behind the door. So it's I'm not complaining either, Captain Nick, but Part 117 is for the birds, quite literally. I hate it.
Are we the birds?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, seven days on the trot sounds like really hard work and
It's-
over the top.
Yeah,
in my book.
it's way too much.
Over the top.
Yeah.
Speaking of over the top, Steph, how have you been?
Good. Glad I don't have to work 7 days in a row anymore, but that happens sometimes.
Yeah.
I've been good. Not a whole lot going on for me either since the last show. Been kind of lazy. Had a nice weekend up in Asheville last weekend. Just kind of relaxing and catching up after the holidays.
Excellent. How's the weather up there? Any snow on the ground still, or nothing?
When I got up there on Saturday, there was just like it almost looked like a recent dusting on the very tops of some of the mountains, and it didn't last very long. It was 60 something degrees on Sunday. Like went for a hike in a t-shirt.
No.
It was nice.
Yeah. Very spring-like weather, I guess.
It will change this weekend though. There is snow in the forecast.
Yeah, before I left on the trip, it was kind of in the, I guess, pushing the 70s here in Atlanta, upper 60s. And then today I noticed it was a little bit nippier than.
Yes, and I think the low tonight, my watch is telling me 28. It's chilly.
Yikes. Yeah. I think it's about the same here in Atlanta. Going to be kind of chilly. Below freezing. Okay. Well, Dana, you mentioned that you are flying a 3-day and a 4-day, I believe you said, 7 days in a row.
Correct.
And I knew that. And you know how I knew that?
Because finally we have something that's been put out there, right?
Well,
we can talk about it. Right?
I've had a calendar on the website, and many of the people that listen to the show know that I always put my schedule on, and so that's how people know where to find me and when and that kind of thing. And then a lot of times people contact me and say, "Hey, I noticed you're going to be in Little Rock on the 24th. Are you going to be up for a meetup?" And I said, "Yeah, let's do that." Well, we finally figured out a way to get more participation from the other crew members, and we now call the calendar the Apg Community Calendar, and we all the hosts have access to it, as well as Hillel, who actually created the calendar, and it was really supposed to be more closely integrated, and it is with Slack, but it's much more than that. It's on the website under calendar, and you can go straight to it now by going to airlinepilotguy.com/calendar. And it's our way to put where we are, where we're going to be, and potential meetups, etc. I think this is going to work out well to be able to convey that information out there for as many people as possible. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, and I actually, the computer idiot that I am, figured out how to get my schedule out there.
Excellent. I saw that, and that is that's very nice.
You
Gonna
know, and
help
I
us.
just want to say, as someone who uses that Slack team member and looks at the meetups all the time, Hillel just has done a wonderful job organizing that and putting that calendar together. What an amazing thing that he did, and how kind of him to pull that together for us. I just really want to thank him for it. And he works really, really hard putting that together. And people should look at Slack, and we'll talk about that later. But again, we need to thank Hillel.
Yes, thank you, Hillel. And again, you don't necessarily. I mean, we do recommend that you join our Slack team, but you don't have to if you want to look at the calendar and see what's going on as well. It's just that you get a little bit higher level of awareness if you are part of our Slack team as well.
And Jeff, let me ask you this: since I'm new to the calendar, how do people contact you? They go through the website, or they email you?
They usually send email to feedback@airlinepilotguy.com. And then we're going to talk about it at the end of the show because we're on social media. Dr. Steph usually tells us about all the ways that you can kind of keep track of what's going on with us on Twitter and Facebook and Slack. So
I was more looking to, for if with my schedule being out there as to how people can, contact me directly.
Well, how would they contact you directly, Dana? Don't you have a
that's
an
what I'm
Airline
getting
Pilot
at.
Guy email address?
Maybe
Yes,
we need to sort that out, and we can figure out a easy way to do that.
Yeah,
Okay, let's
that's-
I have some
Okay.
ideas, but we can maybe brainstorm
Okay,
off air, and then we will tell you what we have come up with. So you're
It's a
not
work-
exactly.
work in
wondering
progress,
what we decided, or we don't tell
Exactly
you
my
something
point.
now and then change our minds.
and that will probably happen for
It
sure.
might happen anyway.
When
I
we
mean,
all reach that higher level of awareness.
We can even using the calendar entries, you can actually probably put ways to contact people right in there as well.
Mhm.
Anyway, so many ways to do it, this technological world of ours. I also want to mention, since we're talking about the Airline Pilot Guy website, Arash is our website guru. And again, at some point soon, we're going to get together and talk about doing some things with the site, including, getting one of those, what are they, secure socket layer things, where I'm sure that many of you have visited the site and it says it's not safe, it's not secure. It's because we, haven't paid a certain amount of money to put in this little piece of software that makes it secure. But we will be doing that sometime here in the future. But one of the wonderful things, a new thing on the site, it's only been active now, I think, for, I don't know, a month or two, couple months. Tiffany Walsh is our APG librarian, and we have a page called the APG Library, where she kind of manages all kinds of great suggestions in various categories, all related to aviation, regarding books that people have read and recommended be included there. And she's done a lot of work, and I want to thank Tiffany for doing that and keeping on top of all that. So check out the APG Library. Again, it's one of the menu items on the website that you should check out. There you go. How many of you are using Roster Buster?
No.
Probably not. Steph, yeah.
Just
I,
kidding.
I haven't a clue what it is.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've never heard of it.
Okay. Well, many people listening to the show, I've heard the fine folks on PTUK talk about Roster Buster and people that they follow that are using it. It's just another way to kind of access your schedule and share your schedule, etc. And early on, the folks at the Roster Buster contacted me, and at that point, Acme wasn't really working with Roster Buster. And I worked with them a little bit, and then it just wasn't going anywhere. And then I kind of just forgot about it. And then I decided I'd give it a shot again. And I signed up and found out that Acme definitely is all part of the system, works like a charm. It's for a year's service, it's like $12. It's like a dollar a month. It's definitely well worth it. And so for those of you out there who are using Roster Buster or are following people on that app, I'm there now. So please, I don't know if I have to approve somebody's to be a friend or whatever, kind of like Facebook. I'm not sure how it works exactly, but just do a search for me and add me to your list of people if you want to see what kind of trips I'm flying, where I am, and all that kind of stuff. So just wanted to mention that. And the nice thing about it is they have a nice little Apple Watch app that goes along with it, and it's pretty handy. So I've been pretty happy with that. My trip last week, I believe it was the day after we recorded our last show, I was in New York City. Flew into Newark and then had the layover in Manhattan. They said the Sheraton Times Square, but it's kind of not really in Times Square, not far from Times Square. But anyway, a fine bunch of people saw that I was going to be in Manhattan and said, I think it's time for another New York City meetup. And I said, I agree. And the location, I believe it's called Faces and Names, and it was just about a block north of the hotel. And we met there on Thursday evening around 6 o'clock. And I brought my Zoom H5 and recorded some audio. And this is the point where I push this button and we listen to what I recorded. Oh, I'm not here to sing. I'm here to record this wonderful meetup we have here at the where are we? Faces and Places. And I hope that I'm not overmodulating and blowing this recording. But, I'm here with a great group of people. Let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of us at Faces and Places on 54th and 7th in New York City. And we're going to start off with somebody here that you've heard from before in the past. She's a big part of our APG community. Her name, Tanya, and she's going to say something to all of you.
Hello, APG crew and APG listeners. It's so great to be at another wonderful APG meetup. Everyone, it was a bigger turnout than we expected. It was really wonderful. We had some wonderful drinks, wonderful food, and more importantly, wonderful company. And this was so much fun.
I agree. Great time. I'm going to move over here to somebody who is a professional in the radio industry. His name, Radio Roger. Say something to our APG community, Radio Roger.
Say something intelligent, I guess.
Well, I didn't say intelligent.
Well, I'm not looking to intelligent, but this is great. Belatedly happy birthday.
Thank you.
And I meant everything I said. You do terrific work.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that.
No, you really
you
are
have
good.
credibility in this whole thing, so I appreciate that.
Or if you don't have credibility, at least I try to fake it.
Well, that's what I do too. People actually think I'm an airline pilot. And here we have another member of our APG community. His name, David Abbey, or Abbey. Abbey.
Yeah, either way, I was telling Jeff today, don't get so hung up on pronunciations, so I'll do anything. You can call me anything. Anyway, great to be here, Jeff. I'm glad you had time for the meetup, and we have a great turnout tonight. Fun time. It's a little bit loud, but it's so good. Yeah. It's all good, and thanks for all you do, Jeff, and Happy New Year.
Thanks
Happy
for all
New
you
Year.
do, David.
Happy New Year to the whole APG crew and community.
I can't tell you how special you are. All right, over here. Hey there. We have a gentleman who is part of our meetup tonight, and tell us who you are and what the heck you're doing here.
I am Jason Rabinowitz. I'm an airline flyer on Twitter. My good friend David Abbey, I think you just heard from, invited me out tonight. Happy to be out here, always meeting up with local av geeks. My friend Joe right here.
How's it going? Joseph Schmidt. I'm String and Rudder on Twitter. Pleasure to be here as well. Also know basically everyone here through David and Jason as well. Originally from Long Island, New York, and happy to be in the city today. And it's a great aviation meetup.
I think I just got the String and Rudder thing. You're a violinist and a pilot.
It took me a long time to get that one too.
It did. It took me. It took you a long time as well. Okay.
Because I'm thinking, wait,
More than I want to admit. how long.
usually it's like stick and rudder. And why is it string and
Oh,
rudder?
you know, so at some point when I was going through flight school, someone said, "Hey, you might want to take a look at this book. It's got some good stuff in there." And actually, it changed my life forever because I said, "Oh, it's finally someone who's talking about the stuff that matters with flying." And I said, "Well, you know what? I've got the and rudder part. Might as well get the string in there somewhere." So,
Awesome. So great meeting you guys for the first time. Thanks for coming out. It was awesome. And let's see, I'm going to make my way over here to the other end of the table. Excuse me. And we have this lovely couple. They're wondering why the heck they bothered to come all the way over here to Manhattan. But I'm glad they did. It is Jonathan and Terry Alexandrakis.
You know, it's so great that we got to meet up today. I was just thinking this morning about how much I missed New York City meetups and how much I really was hoping for the next one. So it was so great that you all did this for me. And I'm really glad that you stuck around for Captain Jeff because this has been fantastic. And I'm ready to go home now. And I had a great night. So thanks, everyone.
Well, you know, it was all for you. I'm glad that we pleased you. You want to say anything?
Well, I'll just say that I'm flying to Denver on Monday, and APG meetups always make me less nervous about flying. So grateful for that.
Really? I thought it would make you actually more nervous of hanging around with people like me. No, that's good. I'm glad that we helped. And I think Tanya is telling me I need to come back over here. You want to say something else?
I just wanted to also say, how could I forget? The best part of the evening was catching up again with the wonderful Captain Jeff.
That's sweet. Thank you very much, Tanya. It's always great to see you. And that's it from Faces and Places in New York City, Manhattan Island. What an awesome place. Bye.
Yeah, I don't like the name Faces and Names. I think Faces and Places is a better name for that place.
So you just went with it at least 3 times.
Yeah, at least.
Yep.
And looks like I've already broken the screen sharing.
You have.
Yeah, you're good at that, Jeff.
Yeah, I know. And it was just the first time. Okay. I was going to see if I could try to get it to work over here with my FaceTime camera, but that's not working either.
Well, you know, you come back on in YouTube when you switched over there. I could see you in YouTube, but not here on our screen.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Weird.
Okay. Well, that's interesting because neither of my cameras is showing a light that indicates to me that they're on.
The Chinese government's hacked them.
Probably.
Now you're gone on YouTube as well.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's okay. It's an audio show. We don't have to see my ugly mug, just have to hear my voice. So anyway, it was a great meetup, as you could tell. They had great music too. Yeah, what else to say? Other than it was not Faces and Places, it was Faces and Names. And when we first got there around 6 o'clock, 6:15, it was very quiet. Well, relatively quiet. You could actually hear conversation. But then as the night wore on and more people got in there, you know, the volume level started going up. And then I guess somebody goes, "Oh, you can hardly hear the music. Let me turn the music up." And then, of course, everybody else starts yelling and they go, "Oh, can't hear the music anymore. Let's turn the music up." So, yeah, oh well, can't complain about that, I guess. It was a good time. All right. That's all I have to say about meetups since the last show. Anything else to discuss before we move on to the coffee fund?
I'll say one more thing about meetups, because I was just saying to Captain Nick that we, or APG, is so fortunate to have such a great group of people, such a wonderful community to be able to meet with and get to know. And I've been very fortunate to be a part of it. And we're really very lucky.
I concur.
Yeah.
I agree. It's a lot of fun. That's why I decided to put out my schedule out there so that hopefully I can be a part of more meetups throughout the APG land.
Don't make him beg, folks.
Don't make me beg, please.
Yeah, it's not a pretty thing. All right. Well, with that, then I think it's time for us to talk about the coffee fund very quickly.
Johnny, how much more coffee?
No thanks.
I love coffee. I love tea. I love the APG community. Coffee and tea and the Java and me. A cup, a cup, a cup, a cup, a cup. All right, that's the Java Jive. We play that most of the time to indicate that we're going to talk about the Coffee Fund and the Coffee Fund cadre. It's your way to support the show financially. And if you have the financial resources to do that, you should go over to airlinepilotguide.com/coffee and learn all about the different ways that you can support us. And basically two. First is something we call the Classic Fund, and that's via PayPal, and you can do a one-time donation or a recurring donation. And since the last episode, we have a few people that took us up on that. Mazuz Karim, Jeff Moeller, a recurring donator, and Nolan Thompson. So thank you very much, guys, for your contributions. And I believe, oh, you know what? Happy birthday, Anissa. I believe that your birthday is coming up this weekend, and I saw that on the calendar. So happy birthday. That is Jeff Muller's lovely wife. And the other way to support the show, be part of the Coffee Fund cadre, is via Patreon. You can become a patron of the show, and that's patreon.com/airlinepilotguy. All that information is available on the website. Check it out. Thank you very much, everyone, for your generous contributions.
Stand by for news.
The first item in our news folder is an article regarding a Boeing 737 MAX 8 stuck in Iran since December 14. A real headache for Norwegian Airlines. And this is from airlive.net. On December 14th, a Norwegian 737 MAX 8 flying from Dubai to Oslo suffered an engine problem and was forced to perform an emergency descent from 32,000 feet to land in Iran. The aircraft, registration Lima November Bravo Kilo Echo, had to circle to burn fuel and shut down one of the engines prior to landing at Shiraz International Airport. No, wait a minute. And shut down one of the engines? That doesn't make any sense. I think the reason why they had to land and divert and land in Iran is because the engine had to be shut down, right? Interesting. Not sure I like the construction of that paragraph. Anyway, this was the first time that a Norwegian aircraft has ever landed in the country, as the airline doesn't have any regular services or contacts in the country. Norwegian Airlines got the stranded passengers to Oslo after sending a replacement aircraft. The passengers have now officially entered Iran and no longer are allowed to enter the United States under the visa waiver program. This means if any of them are flying onwards from Oslo to New York, which many are, they have to go to a U.S. embassy and ask for permission. They might have to do it for the rest of their lives. That was an interesting little twist, I think. Norwegian sent a crew of engineers and maintenance personnel to Iran, but it looks like the plane was not able to be fixed and is going to need a new engine. But due to various sanctions in Iran, or on Iran, importing spare parts for existing Airbus and Boeing aircraft in Iran is forbidden. Special arrangements will have to be made between Iranian and U.S. authorities. It's an interesting story.
You know, I'm curious about a couple of things about that. What if some of those passengers were U.S. citizens? Are they able to come home? And what happens if they leave home again to fly to Norway or the UK? That's a fascinating perspective on this.
I have no idea.
Yeah, it sounds like a big headache all around for everyone.
And then the other question I have, and Nick, you may be able to answer this, is, when you have to make a diversion or you have an emergency, depending on where you are and where your flight space is, how do you choose where you go? I mean, how do you choose Iran if you know that there's a real problem with the relations between your nation and theirs?
Well, there's some pretty high terrain around there, and it may be that there weren't any other suitable diversions available, and that is a problem. There's very high floor there, so basically, the ground is around 10,000 feet high, and there's much higher mountains around. So it may be that the escape profile following an engine failure took them in the direction of Shiraz, knowing that that was the only airfield that they could go to in their situation. Because I don't know what height a 737 will stabilize on one engine, but I would have thought it'll be around 25,000, somewhere around there, depending on the weight. But if that was the case and they were using that as an emergency en route diversion, then it was really behoved on them to make some sort of arrangements there. If it was an airfield that was going to be a major problem for them to land at, then they should have taken a separate route, another route that didn't involve going through that part of high terrain. So it sounds like they might not have done all the work they needed to behind the scenes to make sure it was going to work for them if they ever had an airplane throw in there.
Anybody else care to?
No, I think that was a good assessment.
No.
And isn't Shiraz a red wine?
It is.
It is.
It's a very
Yeah,
good
so you get some lovely Iranian red wines. Yeah.
Now, I mean, looking at the map and their track, where else would they go at that point? I mean, there are not a lot of choices, it doesn't look like to me.
No, they're not. And it's one of the reasons we use that or have that airfield as a nominated emergency diversion. But, if push comes to shove, you have to go there. You have to go there. And, I realize now that they probably will be looking at it again going, well, actually, there's ramifications here we hadn't considered.
Yeah.
And certainly when it becomes obvious to their passengers that if they end up diverting to some of these places, they could have a lot of problems if they're frequent flyers, frequent travelers with their future travel plans. They might be much less keen to go with an airline that uses that airfield or any Iranian airfield as a possible diversion.
Or is overflying that airspace in the first place. I mean,
yeah,
I'm just looking at a
that's
map.
good
I think
point.
there's other ways you could go, even in a 737 between those two routes. I'm not a dispatcher flight planner, but
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Just
there might
doesn't
be
seem like
some.
it would be an absolute necessary thing to do that route.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure of it, but I think at Acme we are not allowed to go in their airspace. We're flight planned around that. That'd be a question for dispatcher Mike, but I'm pretty sure that there are certain airspaces in the world that we don't go over, and I'm sure that's one of them.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right, Dana. Perhaps dispatcher Mike can give us some information about that. Chime in.
But again, not a U.S. airline, so
Right. Yeah, that's true.
agreements are
yeah.
different. I know I've been on aircraft that have been in that airspace on airlines that are not U.S. airlines.
Well,
It does bring up interesting questions if your country, that you're a citizen of, does not have good relations, then you might want to think about those things when you book your flights, perhaps.
Yeah, but I mean,
It's hard to know. Yeah, well, I'm very remote, very remote.
So
And how would you know? How would you know?
And a
that
lot of
the
people
airline's
wouldn't
gonna
know.
fly?
No.
Exactly.
I mean, I didn't even think about something like the ramifications of this. And I'm wondering if this is one of those situations where, they make an exception and they say, okay, these particular passengers just happen to be on that airplane. That,
I think they'd be silly not to,
Yeah.
but it's the government. So.
Yeah, that's true.
It's also the media getting some extra hype out of it too.
It doesn't always have to be logic involved.
Hype, media. What are you talking about, Dana?
No, there's
Come
no
on.
way.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the second item in the folder. Lion Air ends search for crashed Boeing 737 MAX 8's cockpit voice recorder from airlive.net. And it said on January 3rd that they were ending their search for the cockpit voice recorder, the CVR, from the 737 MAX that crashed into the Java Sea in October. But in this article, it says Indonesian investigators said they plan to launch their own probe as soon as possible. And then I just happened to see another news article that said, yes, in fact, Indonesia will launch a renewed search effort as early as Tuesday, which was yesterday, to find the cockpit voice recorder from a Lion Air jet that crashed into the Java Sea in October. Quote from the National Transportation Safety Commission, KNKT, Chief Suranto, we'll just say Mr. T, told Reuters that if the weather is good, the ship will start to depart today. And so they're continuing to search for that cockpit voice recorder, because I think that's going to give us some good information about exactly what happened in that cockpit before it crashed. And moving on, item C. Aeromexico B737-800 at Guadalajara on the 3rd of January. Ground down main wheels on landing. This is from the Aviation Herald. Let's see, registration X-ray Alpha Mike Victor, performing flight 120 from Mexico City to Guadalajara. Let's see, landed on Guadalajara's runway 28 following a seemingly uneventful flight when smoke and flames appeared from the landing gear. The aircraft came to a stop on the runway with all 4 main wheels ground down. Emergency services responded and sprayed the landing gear. The passengers disembarked normally. The runway needed to be closed. The airline reported upon landing, smoke appeared in the landing gear, which was controlled by emergency services. The 151 passengers and crew have disembarked as well. Not really a lot of information. There are some photos in the Aviation Herald article that didn't transfer to the Evernote article. So you can go directly to that link there to the Aviation Herald if you want to see those. But yeah, they did a nice job of grinding those main wheels down to the nubs. And that's the only information we have so far, unless they've come up with some updates on this.
I would, sounds like maybe they landed with the parking brake on.
That's possible. In the commentary on the Aviation Herald website, there were several people that said that actually could have been what happened here.
Do you not get a... No, I'm thinking it's a Boeing. Of course you wouldn't get a warning.
Well, you would think on the Mad Dog you would, if you have the parking brake set.
Oh, really? Oh, you see, you fly a decent airplane, Jeff.
I mean, you get a.
It's old technology anyway, is what you're trying to say,
Enunciation.
right? Like it should be
Yeah.
available.
McDonnell Douglas makes a different aircraft than Boeing does.
Exactly.
True. That is true.
And you probably get a warning when you deploy the anchor as well.
We do. Yeah. And what you have to be very careful of is make sure your leg is nowhere near the chain.
Yes. I mean, we had a skipper who got him in the habit of idly playing with the parking brake lever in the cruise when he was bored, flicking it back and forth.
Uh-oh.
Why you'd want to do that, I do not know. And eventually, with the wheels being a bit wet and up there and the gear had cold soaked, he managed to freeze the brakes in the on position. So, of course, it was all panic then because you couldn't release them again. But very luckily, as they descended and everything warmed up again, they released back to the normal position. But I think that taught him a lesson. And the answer is, when you're on the flight deck, none of those switches, levers, or knobs are to be played with unless you're going to move them for a very specific purpose.
He needed a fidget spinner.
Exactly. That's what he needs. Don't mess about with stuff just for the sake of it, just to see if it still works.
I have to say that there have been times in my 37, 38 year flying career that I have looked at things and gone, wonder what would happen if but I've always kind of said, nope, Jeff, don't do it. Don't touch it. You don't want to be on the news. You don't want to be in the aviation.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean,
somebody else do it.
Yeah. It reminds me of a time I was coming out of Johannesburg, and we had a very minor fault with one of the air conditioning packs, which also pressurized the aircraft. And as we reached the top climb, the first officer said, "Oh, do you want me to do a pack reset and try and get rid of that?" And it was just a sensor that had X'd out because it wasn't getting valid data anymore. And I looked at the journey we had to do over darkest Africa for the next 9 or 10 hours. And I said, no, it's working fine. if we're going to do it, let's do it at the top of descent, not right at the beginning of the trip. And we, in fact, he reminded me at the top of descent, oh, we were going to reset that pack. And we did it. And of course, the pack failed on the reset. So we were only with one pack. And that would have been a situation I would not have enjoyed trolling through Africa on only one pack. So, the answer is, if you don't really need to do something, leave it alone until you're in a situation where it doesn't matter if it subsequently has a problem.
Yeah, what's the phrase I can never remember, or the saying I can never remember? Like,
You can always do something once.
Perfection is the enemy of good enough, or what's the phrase? there's a real saying that I can never remember. No,
if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Yeah, there's another one too, though. That's all right. I'll look it up.
Steph, I can't fix this one in post. So.
Fine.
Yeah. Oh, well.
I was hoping you all would help me here, and you've all failed.
Sorry, we're not doctors. We can't help.
Yeah, we're not doctors and we're not HR, so
someone will help me.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody will come up with it.
Someone who loves me will come to my rescue here.
Oh, we all love you. You know that. Okay. Chris, speaking of loving, Chris loves us and we love him. Chris Cheatwood in Northern Alabama.
The Guru.
Also known as the Guru. Gave us a link to this article from airlinerwatch.com. And it says from Dateline, Montreal. Air travel will become more affordable and more environmentally friendly with 3D printing technology in the near future. The airplanes of American Boeing and European Airbus already have a few components produced with 3D printing. The soap dish is actually in the labs, I believe. No, I'm just kidding. They're using some other pieces as well. Although 3D printing technology becomes more and more common in many industries, it's still a relatively small share in the aviation industry. In the future, therefore, Boeing and Airbus, the two major manufacturers, plan to increase the number of such parts in the production of passenger planes. The first airplane containing a 3D printed component took off in 2014. It was an Airbus A350 with a small 3D printed titanium part located under the pylon connecting jet engines to the wings of the plane. Since then, a number of engines have fallen off. No, wait a minute.
You're thinking about the 747.
The number of such parts has steadily increased. For instance, Boeing already has 60,000 3D printed parts used in its aircraft, which is still relatively a small number, considering that a Boeing 747 consists of 6 million parts. Both manufacturers, however, agree that 3D printing technology provides them with entirely new benefits and opportunities, such as manufacturing complex components that would not be possible with conventional production methods. Now, I think of 3D printing as those little printers that you can buy from Monoprice and other places that use plastic, but 3D printing is also something that they can do with titanium and other steel things and metals and whatever. That's probably
the technical term for it is additive manufacturing.
There you go. AM, baby. That's the future.
Not AI, AM. Got it.
It's AM stuff.
As opposed to PM.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Chris, for sending us a link to that. Now, this is significant. Southwest Airlines is one of those airlines that was just doing things extremely different in the aviation world many, many years ago. And it was led by a gentleman named Herb Kelleher. He founded the airline, and he died yesterday at age 87. And that was, when was this article? A couple days ago.
No, it was 2 days. It was a couple days ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
And but he lived a nice long life, 87 years old. And this is an article that was published quite some time ago. I think it was early. Was it in the 90s or the early 2000s? Anyway,
91.
91. Thank you. And there's also an accompanying video from YouTube that someone sent us as well. That I believe actually it was the Guru that sent in the 60 Minutes interview. Southwest's Herb Kelleher. Very interesting and informative video that you should all watch, because you can kind of get a taste of this guy's personality, which I think was a huge factor in the success of this airline. And many, many airlines out there today use Southwest's model as a model for their business plan for operating low-cost carriers. And anyway, he was quite the man, very funny guy, and we're going to really miss him, but we're really going to bask in all of the wonderful things that he brought to our industry for a long time to come.
Herb Kelleher was really the one of the founders of low-cost airlines. Southwest isn't necessarily that any longer, but when they started, who can believe the legacy that they turned into the legacy carrier that they are? And if it weren't for Herb Kelleher and Southwest and the arguments that took place between Southwest and Braniff and Continental, Houston Hobby would not be as big an airport as it is.
Nope.
And they also talked about go ahead.
The Wright Amendment and all of that. Yeah.
Oh, Love Field.
Yep. And I mean, he was really just he just did things differently at a time when everyone was kind of doing things the same way, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. That interview from 60 Minutes is has a lot of interesting information regarding that, and they kind of focused at I guess during that time, America West and Southwest were really butting heads for the right to basically dominate Phoenix Sky Harbor, and the America West CEO was not very happy about Southwest's
their efforts.
Their efforts there, yeah.
Herb Kelleher also brought hot pants to the flight attendants of Southwest. If you remember, that was one of their selling points quite a while when they first started. I'm not trying to be evil and sexist and everything, but it's really true.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in fact, again, watch that video. You'll see exactly what Mike is talking about there. Things have changed quite a bit since the 90s, and but anyway, so we're gonna miss Herb. Rest in peace, sir. Thanks for doing everything that you did in the industry.
Absolutely.
And moving on, unhappy passengers give British Airways a bumpy ride.
Passengers are never unhappy, right? They're always happy.
They're always
content
happy.
beings. They like flying, and they're always nice to the pilots. No, okay.
Not always, Steph. According to this article from thetimes.co.uk, British Airways has landed near the foot of a league table of short-haul airlines operating in the UK amid passenger dissatisfaction over its food, uncomfortable seats, and pricing. The airline was ranked below many budget operators, such as Jet2, Norwegian, Flybe, and EasyJet, in an authoritative annual passenger survey, coming in 15th out of 19 carriers. Ryanair was at the bottom of the table. And I guess the organization that compiled this was which? ? Travel. Which? Travel.
Authoritative.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Which? Not the Salem.
Salem witches.
Like who, what, where, when, why, how, which.
Yeah.
Did someone put them out?
Anyway, apparently they're doing some things at BA to try to reverse this perception, but I'm not sure how they're doing because I've never flown on British Airways myself.
I had a flight on British Airways this past summer. It was long haul, so not competing with the short haul budget carriers. But it was a very nice experience. It was also in business class. And
of course,
the food was excellent, and the service was really nice. I had a pleasant experience.
They should really consult with our good friend Neville Bounds, who loves British Air, and he could fix them right up.
You're right, Micah. Is Neville with us today in the chat?
No, he's skulked off.
Little late over there in the UK. Yeah, so that's all we have to say about that right now, I guess. And then finally, a cockpit canopy falls off an F-15 at 30,000 feet. And the article from popularmechanics.com starts off by saying, losing the canopy at 30,000 feet isn't the worst thing that can happen to a person in a fighter jet, but it's still a heck of an unpleasant experience. But it didn't matter to the crew of an Israeli Air Force F-15. The two-person crew braved battering winds and freezing temperatures after their cockpit canopy detached in mid-flight, leaving them exposed to the elements, and landed the jet at a nearby military airfield. It's only the third time in history an F-15 cockpit has detached in flight, and in all three cases, air crews were able to safely land their planes. Now, I have a little bit of audio that we can listen to if you'd like, and I'm going to have to read the, what do they call those things? Subtitles?
Narrative?
Closed captioning, because they're speaking mostly in Israeli, or no, Hebrew, I guess. It would be the right term for the language they speak. And so I'll try to do my best to give you what they're saying here. So here we go. What height are you going to stay at? The navigator calls out to the pilot by radio. Really should say intercom. I hear you. Do you hear me? I'm taking it in for a landing at the nearest base without a canopy. Can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you. Are you all right? Yes, I'm fine. We're out without a canopy and headed to within the range of the nearest base. The younger man says, try to take it below 200 knots. We're headed for a landing at Nevatim. We have no problem getting to the base. Continue moving forward. Are you with me, brother? Yes. Is everything okay? Is your seat down? Yes. I'm very scared. You didn't say that. We're making an immediate landing. Can you please put lights out? And the tower at this place said yes. Okay, copy. We will advance to the 1/3 cable. Copy that. The 1/3 cable mark is set. Pilot says wheels down for landing. Maybe Hillel can tell me how I did with the translation. But I was just reading somebody else's translation, actually. So don't bother telling me. Hillel. It wasn't me. So that was an interesting little experience there. Did you hear the obviously the navigator, the flight lieutenant or first lieutenant was younger than the pilot. At least it sounds that way. It sounds like he was not very happy about the situation. Anyway.
Well, it's going to be a bit windy, Jeff.
A little bit. Probably more windy for the guy in the back than it is in the front, right? Or
probably the reverse, actually, because the guy in the back, I suspect, has got pretty good protection, and he can duck his head right down, and he doesn't have to look out.
Oh, okay.
It's the guy in the front's got to still try and fly, but it's not like a depressurization in a civil aircraft. The cockpits of military aircraft are generally only pressurized to around half your altitude. So if he was at 30 grand, the cockpit probably would have been pressurized to 15,000. And therefore, we used to use a rule of thumb of half height plus 2. So if we're at 30,000 feet, it would have been 15,000 plus 2 is 17,000 feet would have been the canopy, the cockpit pressurization level. So there's not that much of a pressure change when if you lose the canopy. It would have been damn noisy, and if you'd been extremely high speed, that could have been dangerous, because if the wind gets under your helmet or whatever, then it could really it could rip your bone dome off, which could be very painful, or worse. But once you got your head down, the visor down, you've got a mask on, it should be really quite survivable. Communication's the biggest thing. The noise is incredible. So get the speed back, get the aircraft down. and then Bob's your uncle. We used to fly the Hunter round the circuit with the canopy rolled all the way back, just for fun. Your elbow out on the cockpit rail,
Looking cool.
A little fresh air.
Cool. Yeah, couldn't hear a thing, but you look great.
That's the important thing.
Exactly right.
Well, Hillel is with us in the chat room, and he said that the translation was pretty accurate, not completely, but pretty close. And also, as you mentioned, the F-15s are pressurized, but a good point made that they're not like passenger airliners with very high PSID or pressure differential because they have their helmets on and their oxygen masks on the entire time. So you don't have to worry so much about
the Delta P.
About the Delta. Oh, no.
Sorry.
Steph, you got to warn me when you say
I'm sorry.
that. Okay, go ahead. Say that again.
About the Delta P.
Yes. Thank you. For those of who are listening,
It's been a while since we've had a Delta P reference. I'm sorry.
If you're a new listener, anytime we say Delta P, I try to ring the bell. But I didn't think of it.
Well, F-15s are just built like tanks. Nick and I were talking about it before, back about 4 years ago. An Israeli F-15 lost a wing and came down easily, landed and everybody was saved. And just an incredible aircraft.
Yeah. In fact, the pilot didn't know that basically most of the wing was gone until after he was on the ground. And when
that's because F-15 pilots never look out.
Well, okay.
I feel like we might be getting some feedback from an F-15 pilot here soon.
Perhaps I should just stop talking about it right now.
No, let Nick keep talking. It'll be good.
I've said my bit. That's it. I'm just going to sit back and wait for the return.
They're not Boeings.
I'm sure they would be by now.
Okay, that was it for the news, and I think now it's time for the one of the best part of the shows. Not the best, but pretty darn good stuff. We call it the feedback segment. And this is where I put it. All right, let's start off with some feedback from Deanna. And she's a veterinarian in North Carolina. And she was trying to contact us via that darn website form on the website, and it wasn't working. And so, hey, by the way, if anybody sent us feedback and we still haven't covered your feedback, it's either because it was just no good and we just threw it away, or more likely, it's because we never got it because that form stopped working at some point. And so now we just recommend everybody use the email feedback@airlinepilotguy.com until we get that thing fixed, or use the app. Another way to do it. So Deanna says, Happy New Year to you. Let's see. She said that she sent some feedback via the website form, and she's waiting with bated breath to hear hers. And then I told her, yeah, we didn't get it. So she said, yes, I sent it through the website. It was about pilot health and when and if doctors can violate confidentiality and notify the FAA if there is a serious risk presented by a pilot's health issue. Is there a better way to send feedback? I thought, oh, wait, I don't need to read that. Just in this case, wait, no, I'm reading what I wrote back to her. I should have taken all this out. Basically, she wanted Dr. Steph to weigh in on this. She said, specifically, I was thinking of the Germanwings pilot who locked his captain out of the cockpit and intentionally crashed the plane. He had serious mental issues, and his doctor had advised him not to fly. Why would the doctor not have revoked his medical certificate? Would he have specifically had to tell the doctor, I'm going to crash an airliner, before the doctor was compelled to report? I'm a veterinarian, and we are held by confidentiality laws as well. However, there are a few animal diseases that present a public health threat to humans and or agriculture. These are reportable to state authorities. So, Dr. Steph.
Yeah. Hey, Deanna, great question. And I really, so in the Germanwings instance, it probably gets a little bit trickier to discuss just because it was it happened in a country whose laws I'm not as familiar with, but I can tell you more about what would happen here in the U.S. I think everyone here, whether you're know much about medicine in this country or not, most people have heard of this thing called HIPAA that we have, which is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, passed in 1966 or 1996. Wow. And it basically says it covers a lot of protected health information. So things that would clearly identify a patient to someone else and perhaps disclose sensitive health information without that person's consent. We're not allowed to do those things as physicians. Basically, we have to, if we're going to talk about something related to a patient or a patient case, you have to remove all identifying information so that it can't be tied to a specific person. You can't, for example, I can't see Dana as a patient and then when he's not on the show, come on the show and say, "Oh, hey, Dana was my patient, and we talked about this, that, and the other, and he's got all these issues." That's a violation of HIPAA and would not be okay in any circumstance.
And you'd be scarred for life too.
Well, not me, perhaps everyone else listening. But so there are some exceptions to this, and specifically in the case of when there is a I'm going to read it because it's specific terminology. It says, when it's necessary to prevent or lessen a serious and imminent threat to the health or safety of a person or the public, and is a threat to a person or persons reasonably able to prevent or lessen the threat, including the target of the threat. So, who would that involve? So, if someone threatens that they're going to harm themselves, if they name a specific and credible threat to another person, if they identify that they're going to do something that would harm the public, then there is a duty to warn in most states. And I can speak specifically to the state I practice in, which happens to be North Carolina. And so what North Carolina says is that a responsible professional, it's pretty broad terminology there. They're not saying you must be a doctor or a specific type of doctor, like a psychiatrist, a psychologist. A responsible professional may disclose confidential information, so something that a patient says to you in confidence, basically, when in their opinion there is an imminent danger to the health or safety of the client or another individual, or there is a likelihood of the commission of a felony or violent misdemeanor. So who do you warn in those cases? It can be it varies by state. So these are all become kind of state-specific things in the United States. It may vary from country to country, but I get the sense that, especially in Europe, a lot of countries have similar legal terminology in place. But if there's a threat that you can reasonably identify and you believe it to be a credible threat, you can warn the person who's the target of the threat. You can warn law enforcement to take action if they deem it necessary. So yes, you can break confidentiality in those cases. Now, it gets a little bit tricky because there has to be for the provider, the person who's hearing this information from the patient or from the client in whatever case it is, something that's specific, something that's identifiable, usually naming exactly what they're going to do, what they intend to do, a person or group of people they intend to target. If you don't have those things, then it becomes very much a gray area, and it's much harder to say, yes, I thought there was a credible threat. So it's a little bit of a judgment call, and it can be really hard for a practitioner or provider to make that judgment call sometimes, I think. It is probably a little bit different in the case of aviation medical examiners. I can't get it. I didn't research that quite as much there. It's certainly they're subject to these same laws and rules and regulations. However, if there's something that compromises flight safety, whatever that medical condition is, they're going to follow the rules of that the FAA has set forth and their recommendations for individual medical conditions.
So it's not quite as sacrosanct as a priest's confessional.
Not quite. I mean, and I don't know about priests. We may need their input there as well. But if someone were to come into me and say, "Hey, I'm going to carry out this specific, active criminal act that's a felony or a violent misdemeanor against this specific person, then I have a duty and a responsibility under North Carolina laws to act to warn that person somehow, whether it's through law enforcement or directly to the potential victim.
I'm curious. This lady's a vet, and she has to maintain confidentiality as well. Does that mean she has to ask permission of the dog before she reveals what illness it has?
I don't think it's
You mean
quite
she
like
can't
that.
tell me about the health of my friend's puppy?
Yeah, I mean, it is like that. If where this comes into play more often than not is between people who are friends outside of a work environment and says, "Oh, hey, my friend Bob said he came to see you in the office the other day. How's he doing?" You can't say anything. You can say, well, you can ask Bob how he's doing, but I guess it's the same thing for your pet. If your veterinarian saw a friend of yours just in a like at a restaurant or a supermarket or something and said, "Oh, hey, I know you see my friend's dog, and I know they had this problem. How's the dog doing?" I guess they can't report that, or they can't share that information either.
Okay, I guess it really is. It's confidentiality between the pet's owners, not between the pet and the owner.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Checking.
Well, and what she's saying is that if there's a specific illness that an animal has that represents a public health hazard to a person or group of individuals, then they would have a responsibility to report that to state authorities.
I understand from the publicity that surrounded the event she refers to that the confidentiality law, the medical confidentiality law in Germany was particularly tight. And as a consequence, this chap, because he concealed to the many doctors he saw that he had various problems and he was receiving multiple treatments and things, they weren't allowed to,
talk to each other,
speak to each other
basically,
and find out the big picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it gets tricky in that sense. If you have someone who, say, seeks medical advice from someone but doesn't disclose their profession per se, which doesn't always come up in some cases, there may not be a perceived threat in that instance. If
You have to report it if they're a threat to themselves or others, but if you don't know what profession they are, you don't know.
You
if
don't
they're
know what the threat
necessarily a
is.
threat. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's good information to make note of if you're seeing patients. But I can see where it gets tricky. It gets into some gray areas, and unless the person who's going to commit those acts specifically gives you a reason to be on guard about it, there's not much you can do about it. They can tell you that they're, a patient could tell you that they're depressed, that they're, that they've had thoughts of being suicidal, but unless they specifically say in that instance that they have a plan in place to harm themselves or to harm others, that's not a reportable thing in most cases. Now, if he's telling that to his aviation medical examiner, that may be something completely different because that falls under different regulations in terms of flight safety. But if they tell that to their regular doctor or their psychologist or their psychiatrist, unless there's a specific plan that they name or they say, "Hey, yeah, I'm actually going to do this," no, that's not a reportable thing.
I do have another question, though. She said that she was a veterinarian, but what branch did she serve in? Army, Navy, Marines?
Bam, where's my rubber shot? Yeah.
So I hope that answers your question, Deanna. And
yeah, I think the chances of you flying with a drunk pilot are much higher than you flying with someone who's likely to commit suicide.
Yeah,
Knocking futz.
And what's worse is
we heard you the first time, Grady.
What's even worse is a drunk psycho pilot.
Yes.
Well, fortunately, most people out there are decent and are professionals and work
I don't
hard
know,
to
Steph.
maintain
You haven't followed some of the people that I follow.
Let's take a straw poll amongst us. Who's decent and professional?
My hand is
Oh, yeah,
firmly in
come
the
on.
air here.
The rest of us, nah.
Yeah.
I don't see Jeff's avatar raising his hand.
Well,
Yeah.
he's
No.
unfortunately got
very
Guillain-Barré
frustrating.
syndrome.
In fact, his eyes are crossed. He
Can't
looks
move.
decidedly drunk.
Yeah. So this is an aside here, a technical pause. So I'm having to. I think I'm having to like white box, like select the video thumbnails of everybody to throw them up on the main screen. Right now, I do not have. I have the auto mode selected. What you guys are seeing on your screens will probably be different than what our chat room and the people watching the video see. So I'm going to ask right now to those of you in the chat room, if you're still listening to our show, what do you see? Do you just see my little avatar and little
I'm in the
circles?
chat room, Jeff, and you're only seeing your avatar.
Okay. So now if I select this, do you see your video?
Waiting for it to switch here. So far, your avatar is still up, but we're waiting because we know that
It'll
the
be
delay.
another 15, 20 seconds probably. I'm just wondering if I'm wasting my time.
I only see Dana on my screen.
Okay, now we're up. You can
Okay.
see me and Nick.
Okay, so when I'm selecting things, then that's what everybody's seeing. Okay, so if
I'm only seeing Dr. Steph.
And I only see
seeing
Dana.
Dr. Which I have to say is much nicer than our usual arrangement.
Yeah,
So,
let's just keep it on Dr. Steph.
I'm
She's
trying
the
to do
best
videos. I'm trying to do video switching as best
I wish
can.
I could take any credit for that, but I haven't done anything.
I'll just default to Steph's video.
What are you drinking?
Unnecessary. Unnecessary.
What are you drinking, Steph?
I am drinking a hop, drop, and roll from Noda.
I confirmed with
IPA.
my local Total Wine that they do not have any beers from Noda.
I have managed to save 2 Hoppy Holidays.
Oh, thank you. I look forward to drinking them.
You just need to find yourself in Charlotte.
Well, I do.
Or I need to find myself in Atlanta and bring the beer with me somehow.
That's a good idea.
Okay. That's a good idea. See where your preference lies
Great
there.
idea.
Fine.
Okay. Pause is over. Well, thanks, Deanna. What you really, started a good conversation there. I'm not sure we really, answered it. What's the word I'm looking for? Definitively.
No, and I do apologize for my semi-humorous veterinary questions.
Yeah, how insensitive.
Well, actually, I mean, it is interesting because I actually did not realize that vets were held to the same confidentiality laws.
Yeah, I didn't either.
That is interesting. I mean, it makes sense. It just never occurred to me for whatever reason. I wonder where and I wonder where you are in North Carolina, Deanna. Anyway.
Is that where the hippo of the Hippocratic Oath came from? From the veterinary profession?
Or Hippocrates.
Could have been. But I prefer my version.
That's probably it. All right, let's move on before this thing degenerates into...
Too late.
You mean degenerates any further?
Any further. Okay, well, let's talk about Dana's germs.
No, you can skip 2.
Oh, no, that's good. I can't wait for this one.
So Rob says, hi, crew. Just listen to the episode when you talked about picking up germs from the hotel rooms, like the TV remote. Dana, don't be worrying about no remote germs. I watched a video that this guy set up. He was curious as to how the cups and glasses were cleaned in his room when there is never any fresh glasses or cups on the maid's cart. He set up a hidden camera in the bathroom and bedroom, and this blew him away when he reviewed what he had filmed. The maid came in, put the cups and glasses in the sink. Okay, so far so good. Went out, came back into the bathroom with some spray bottles and washcloth. All okay at this stage. She then got the cloth and cleaned around the toilet bowl. Uh-oh. And then went to the sink and washed the cups and glasses with the same cloth. This was in a high-end hotel, not some cheap motel. So When I
you
stay at the
guys will
hotel-
be safe because you stay in cheap motels, don't you?
No.
Very.
This was actually this was actually a 60 Minutes episode
Yeah,
from many
I've
years
seen the
ago
same
that
thing.
I saw, and I've seen it. And yeah, it happens. And they brought in a black light and looked at the cover. I just won't go
No,
through
we don't
everything
talk
that they
about that.
found, but yeah, I mean there can be messes anywhere.
Well, the only good thing is your toilet bowl is usually cleaner than your kitchen worktop counter.
And that's why we let our dogs drink out of them.
Yeah.
It's the magic fountain. It
lick
just
you.
refills itself. It's great, especially when your dog is toilet bowl height. Poor Taco can't benefit from
You know
that.
what?
but
I don't
previous
care.
dogs have.
I really don't care. It's just whatever, it's not going to kill me. more
I
than
don't ever
likely.
touch the glasses in the hotel room.
I do.
Ever.
every
I
time.
do.
I'm still
Nope.
here. I just turned
Hey.
60 and I'm still okay. I drink
I
water
just,
from the
I just think
airplane.
I'm building up my immune system. I like to
Exactly.
challenge it
Yeah.
from time to time with
Cheers.
some.
But we're
There you
drinking
go. Look at that.
alcohol out of ours. Which
There
So
you
you've
go.
killed the germs.
Not
I'm
really.
drinking
What's the
water out
proof
of a
on that
glass.
stuff? Not strong enough.
Yeah. Sissies. Okay. Thanks, Rob. Liz and Jen sent this. Well, actually, Liz sent this. She said that she and Jen Niffer were discussing the old TV series Get Smart. She found this very amusing YouTube clip featuring their take on airlines. As Jen said, funny on so many levels. Enjoy. Okay, so that means I have to go over here. We'll fix this in post, and I need to see if I can get this little snippet of this. I don't want to play too much of it because I don't want to get in trouble. So let me go to the current show and go to this and see what happens when I push this button. Nothing. I wish I could read lips. See what those guys are saying.
How come we're the only ones aboard, Chief? Security. I'll fill you in as soon as we're safe at 30,000 feet.
Chief, we're now flying at 30,000 feet.
Good. Now, Max, listen carefully. We just received a call from an informer who told us...
That's incredible, Chief.
Take it down.
Chief, there's one thing I forgot to mention.
What's that?
It's top secret.
Take it up.
You can always go around. Anyway, it's a very cute clip of them on a mostly 707. There is a shot of a 747, I think, flying overhead. But then
Were they trying to say it was the same airplane?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but it was very cute. I loved that series in the from the 60s and 70s, I believe.
Oh, absolutely. Same. It was the intro with the hundreds of doors, or seemingly so that he had to walk through to get into their secret headquarters.
I was
It ends with the phone booth.
I was just humming that song the other day, and both of my layovers, both in South Carolina. This company must have some kind of a sweet deal with the airport authorities in South Carolina. But it's when you're walking, you're leaving the airport terminal, going from the secure restricted area to the public area. You walk through these little doors, and as they see you approaching, they open up, and there's like a series of 3 or 4 of them. And it's just like every time I walk through them, I'm thinking, dun da dun dun dun. And then everybody looks at me like, what are you singing? Because most of the people that I'm flying with have no idea what Get Smart is.
Oh,
Yeah, but it's when you take your shoe off and try and pretend it's a telephone that they get really worried.
Yes.
I use a banana.
Don Adams was just brilliant. He was just amazing. And Barbara Feldon has got to be one of the sexiest women in the world. Even now,
agree.
I spoke with her on the radio once, and she's just an amazing actress and really had an amazing life.
Yeah. Great show. All right. Brian from Katy, Texas writes in, and he says, does Acme have a cookbook or a beer brewing book? Seems like an opportunity, but who really wants airline food at home? So this is from jalopnik.com. So what's the big deal with airline food? It's the joke without a punchline, but it's something I've been legitimately asking myself since I found out that United Airlines is releasing their very own cookbook, chock full of recipes that they serve in flight. Yep, a whole cookbook of airline food. Thankfully, though, it's not as bad as it sounds. United's executive chefs. United's executive chefs have teamed up with chefs from the Trotter Project, a nonprofit organization that provides education to disadvantaged young chefs, according to the I should have somebody else read this, Detroit Free Press. Thankfully, this isn't a recipe book chock full of things like 5 interesting ways to eat a peanut, or I'm too hungry to complain about these lukewarm mashed potatoes. It's the good stuff from business class, where Steph flies and Nev.
That's an awful small
Can
cookbook.
confirm the food is usually pretty good.
Yeah. Let's see. So the article goes on to talk about the cookbook from United and some other airlines that have put out cookbooks in the past. I'm wondering, I don't think it mentions this in this article, but I do know, or I think I know, and if I don't correct me, that most of the food that is served aboard airliners have a very high salt content and other spices because our taste buds are affected by altitude.
Well, your sense of smell is affected, I think, more
Oh.
so, wasn't it? Which affects your sense of taste.
Okay, that makes sense.
But yes, you're correct. So they need to add more salt and more spices to make it taste more like what you would expect if you were not at a cabin altitude of 8,000 feet.
I can just hear the advertisement for this book now. Want your food over-seasoned, flavorless, and mushy? Well, try the United Cookbook.
And lukewarm.
I'm not sure about that sense of smell thing, because when I break wind, my first officers still turn green.
Well, that just says something about
imagine how bad it really
powerful man.
And you get sit right next to him there, Micah.
Lucky Micah.
He's pretty good, but he's no Captain Al.
I think I will write the book, though, entitled 5 Interesting Ways to Eat a Peanut. I think that'd be a bestseller.
I'm glad that. Never mind.
HR is present. I'm not gonna say it.
So this reminds me. We were talking about breaking wind and that kind of thing, and I received my daughter Natalie is in Germany or Austria or somewhere over there, somewhere in Europe, and she sends. I get these texts from her today, and she has these pictures of like biplanes and men with these wings, like the early days of aviation. I keep looking at the camera, but there's no reason for me to do that.
Like people who attach wings to their arms and try to like flap off a cliff.
Clearly it's some kind of an aviation museum. And then she sends a picture, a snapshot, and then she says, MD-88 ? And then I'm thinking, gosh, even my youngest daughter.
Has she been listening to the show?
I know. And then she shows some more. I think it's like in a gondola of some, balloon or something. And she says, didn't know you were working today.
No.
And then she sends another picture of another one, like a single wing thing, but it's still like, very old, technology. And she ends this whole conversation with Gutenfart.
Well, I can neither confirm nor deny that we may have put Natalie up to sending you those.
Well, that would make sense now that I'm thinking about it, because I basically sent her a little emoticon with a little a teardrop dropping from her right eye, like you et you what is it et tu Brutus?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I had to do the Google Translate to figure out what Gutenfart means, and it's not what I thought. It means good ride, not.
Oh, really?
Yeah, not what.
Not what you were thinking.
F-A-H-R-T, I believe. Fart. I'm sure the Germans in our
they're cringing right now. They're going.
Yes, they are there.
Anyway, that's what reminded me. Nick's talking about the rarefied air, so to speak.
Yeah.
Anyway,
not rarefied enough.
Very rare. Raw, I should say.
How did we get here from cookbooks?
I don't know.
Okay.
But thank you, Brian from Katie. Gave us somewhere to launch off into some other Yes. Guten Fahrt to you, Brian from Katy. Texas, Charlie and Sean sent us a link to this article. You may have heard about this. Interesting and controversial, I think. Tip your flight attendant? Is this true? If so, is this what we're coming to? As a restaurant manager, I wish our industry would just pay a fair wage instead of $2.13 per hour and expect the guest to pay for their servers' living expenses. I'm pausing. I know, Nick, and everybody listening from other parts of the world, not the United States, that's not the system, but it is here that they pay extremely low pay rates, and they expect everybody to make up the difference. A majority of their pay comes from tipping, and I'm afraid that a lot of people don't know that. Anyway, continuing with Texas Charlie. As an airline patron, I fear the ultra low-cost carriers will start lowering fares any way they can, and as pilots' wages go up, will the cabin crew wages become gratuity-centered? Inquiring minds want to know. And he put a link to this Business Insider article. U.S.-based Frontier Airlines has started asking passengers to tip their cabin crew. The revelation was spotted by flight blogger J.T. Genter in The Points Guy. Genter said that in 350 flights on 51 different airlines, he had never been asked to tip crew before. After ordering refreshments on the airline, passengers are handed a mobile tablet, which prompts them to add gratuity to their bill. According to Frontier, flight attendants will now earn tips on their individual sales. What do you think about this?
Oh, I could let rip about the system here in the States. It's just a hidden tax that a lot of people don't realize they're paying. So why not just put the price to a reasonable level and do away with tipping, because it's an unfair system, because it doesn't guarantee a living wage for the people who do these menial tasks of serving everybody. They deserve better than that. They deserve to know what they're getting at the end of the month. And of course, people they think they're doing something nice, where in fact all they're really doing is paying their wages. And personally, I think tipping is an immoral system in the way that it has become. I saw nothing wrong with a waiter getting a waitress getting a decent wage, and then if you think you've had an exceptionally nice evening with really good service, you're putting a little bit on top, which is a little extra to say thank you for a very nice evening. But having to pay someone's wage because the restaurant wants to cut its prices to the bone, I think is wrong. And to let that creep into other areas like the airline world, where the people who are serving you aren't really there to serve you. They're there to ensure your safety in the event of a mishap on the aircraft. And, to insist that some of their worth is really because they've just served you a drink, I think is definitely sending the wrong message.
Got a couple of things to say about this. One is in Maine, we just passed a new minimum wage law. There were all sorts of things going on for the past couple of years, and they changed the minimum wage for wait people, waiters and waitresses. And the wait people were totally against it. They didn't want it changed. They didn't want it raised. They didn't want it raised because they felt, based on the raise and how the tipping works, they would actually make less money with the raise than what they were making currently with the current tipping system, because some of them were making considerably more with tips than they would with the minimum wage and no tips. But in terms of tipping a flight attendant, I have many issues with that, incredible issues with it, because a flight attendant is not a waiter nor a waitress. A flight attendant is a safety expert and is there for my safety and to make sure that I am, as a passenger, taken care of in case of an emergency, in case of a medical emergency, in case of an evacuation, in case of whatever it happens to be. They are experts. They are trained. They are paid professionals. And they're not, yes, part of their job is to serve a cocktail here and there, but they do that to me and I'm paying for it in coach. That's one thing. Maybe I'm paying for it and I'll give them the 20% tip that goes along with that. But in first class and business class, there's no charge for drinks. So why would I even think of tipping them? And if their wages are reduced, then they're going to be making less money from their first class and business class passengers. Overall, it just makes no sense at all. And if it starts with flight attendants, and why not pilots? I think it's a totally inappropriate thing.
I'm all for tipping pilots, by the way. Just wanted to put that up.
Make more money.
I'll give you give all your pilots a tip. Buy low, sell high.
And then we'll just reverse it and buy high and sell low.
I have to wonder a little bit because they're using I haven't flown Frontier in quite a long time. But I tend to see this happening in a lot of places where you wouldn't normally expect to tip for whatever product is that you're purchasing or
Like
receiving.
Dunkin' Donuts and McDonald's when you're at a counter. I hate that.
Yeah, well, and I think part of it is the way that some of these generic mobile point of service devices have been built, that it's just kind of the default, after they run your credit card, it goes, oh, would you like to add a tip? And then everyone looks at it and goes, oh, well, if I don't add a tip, then I'm a real Scrooge here,
That's what I'm thinking. Like you go and get something to go.
Yeah.
I've done that a couple times on the last trip.
There's always the option to add a tip.
Yeah, and I'm going, well, why would I tip? But then I'm thinking, well, are they doing really any less work than the waiter or waitress at the table? I keep going back and forth with that. Maybe I should give them a little tip or something. But I don't know. As you said, Steph, it's getting like completely out of control.
I think some of it is the way that I'm thinking of Square in particular as the kind of offending thing here. You go and you purchase something and they're using Square, and no matter what it was, you could be like at a craft fair and it's like, oh, do you want to add a tip for this craft you just purchased? It's like, no, I don't want to add a tip.
But then you
Crap
feel like
you
just
just purchased.
Yeah.
Like if you don't.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm a cheapskate SOB either. I mean, I just pulled in here to the Marriott and unloaded, and the guy at the front desk could leave your car here. It's fine. I'll watch it. You can go park it later. So I handed him $5. I think that's pretty fair. And then the bellman came by and helped me with my bags and carried them up to the room, and I gave him $5. And I think that's pretty fair. But a flight attendant, I'm hoping, is being paid reasonable wages. And if they're not, then they should be, because they're experts at what they do. They are experts in safety, and they're being paid like pilots are. The door closes and the door opens. They're paid for their flight. And it's not that I don't want them to be paid well, and it's not that I wouldn't necessarily want to tip them. But where's the appropriateteness? I think that's
where do you draw the line on it?
All right, so I'm going to throw something out here, as I normally do anyways, but let's think of this for a second, okay? What's the first thing, especially Jeff, Nick, myself, as soon as somebody finds out that you work for an airline, what's the first thing you generally, well, it's probably the second thing once they find out you're a pilot. First thing they always ask is, what's your route? Second thing is, can you get me cheap airfare? All right. So that's what all they care about. So and I'm not defending the idea of tipping in-flight flight attendants at all. I think that I agree with everyone on the panel. It shouldn't be done because they are there for your safety, period. So if you're flying for an airline that is a decent airline that pays their people a decent wage, that's a whole different ballgame than all these people that are getting on these cheapskate airlines because they don't want to pay a decent wage. Now, Nick, I do disagree with you in something. It's not an added tax. The VAT tax is an added tax. You guys over there in Europe are taxed to nobody's ends of businesses, and of course, try to get on an airplane, go over there, it's $170 worth of taxes to come into England alone. So that's a different thing. Now, where we have fundamental disagreement is that I think that with people being motivated by a tipping system, that the people that are providing the service will tend to give better service in hopes of making more money. Just as Micah was alluding to, you're going to make more money, and if you're getting a regular paycheck, well, the reason why they don't want that is because, well, now the government has access to the higher wage and how much they're making and how much they can tax them. And the whole reason why when I tip, I always tip in cash, because Uncle Sam doesn't need to know about the cash. A lot of people just put it on their credit card, and then they get hit with the taxes on that. So it's a double-edged sword. It is if you pay people a fair living wage on a service industry, not as a flight attendant's paid specifically for the safety, but if you get a driver or you get a person that's working in a restaurant pouring you drinks, bringing you food, if you get great service, well, you get a great tip. If they pour me a little bit taller vodka or bourbon or scotch or whatever else, I'm going to tip them well. If they give me exactly 1 1/2 ounce measured, they get exactly the appropriate tip to go along with that. So, there is an advantage to it, and that is they earn what they are giving as far as service goes. And it's all about price. It comes down to, at Acme or American United, you're not going to ever see that, I don't think, because they're fairly compensated, the in-flight staff. You get to Frontiers and Norwegians and Ryanairs, they pay them jack. I'm not even going to say the word. Jack crap.
Yeah.
So.
Well, an interesting little twist on that is that at Frontier right now, the tips that are received are pooled together and shared equally amongst all members of the flight attendant crew on a given flight. So that kind of takes away the incentive for somebody to go above and beyond, right? I mean,
sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, and that's often the way it occurs, because when you're tipping through a machine, there's no way that you will ever know whether the person who actually served you gets that money. What's the guarantee that says that will happen? It'll often go towards the restaurant owner, and it's up to them to decide where it goes, because there's no legal system. And as regards tipping and avoiding paying taxes, well, I understand the restrictions and the resistance there is to funding your government here in America, and I really don't want to get into that discussion, because I've got so many opinions on that, and this isn't a podcast about taxes, but I think everyone needs to contribute a certain amount towards a country to ensure that it has the ability to do the things that the government needs to do, and avoiding that system is self-defeating.
And if you remember correctly, tips, the definition of it is to ensure proper service.
Right.
The service should be there automatically.
Oh, very well said.
With a flight attendant.
Yes. Okay. Well, I think we covered that one pretty well. Thank you.
Good
Texas.
discussion, actually. Well
Yeah.
done, Texas Charlie. You really stirred the pot there.
Absolutely. Well, let's see. We discussed about the Autoland ILS protection on, I believe it was the last show. Adam Spink, our professional air traffic controller, manager, supervisor, wrote in and said, just listening to the chat about ILS protection and Autolands in Cat 1 might be worth saying that the details read out by Dana only apply in the United States. And I thought we were kind of clear on that, but maybe not. So that is only the United States that those details apply. He says in Europe and the rest of the world, the ILS critical area is always protected, regardless of weather, when the ILS is being used. When Category 2, Category 3 approaches, RVR 550 meters, and cloud ceiling below 200 feet are in use, the ILS sensitive area is also protected as part of air traffic control low visibility procedures when the approaching aircraft is within 2 nautical miles. At Heathrow, we have removed the cloud trigger for entering ATC low visibility procedures, so we can continue with Cat 1 approaches even with some cloud at 100 feet. Regards, Adam. Thank you, Adam, for that clarification. Anything else to add, anybody?
I learn something new every day.
We do, and as soon as you stop learning stuff, then it's time for us to move on to the next life.
It's time for me to move on to the next life.
Yes, No, it's not.
Are you saying it is now? You've
I
stopped.
thought you said you learned
Well,
something.
I'm trying to resist learning all this new stuff because I'm thinking, well, I've only got 4 months to go. What's the point?
That's what I was going to say. Not for 4 months, Nick. Not for 4 months.
You never know, okay? You never know when
yes,
you
I
might
do.
need that little
I
morsel
know.
of it.
I've
No,
seen my future.
no. Yeah, Dana had it for you, right? With the
Oh
the,
yes, yeah.
looking glass.
Dana's looked in his crystal testicles,
Yeah.
and he knows what's in store for me.
My big crystal.
Oh,
That's
boy.
true. That's
All
very,
right.
it's very big.
Moving
only
on.
only one of them though, just like Hitler.
Huevos grandes.
All right. Jacob writes, simming on the Mad Dog, Captain Jeff and Captain Dana, as well as the rest of the crew. But a question towards the two of you. After many years of flying the Airbus simulator, I finally found a good Mad Dog simulator in X-Plane 11. On my first flight, I had difficulty starting the engines without Googling the instructions. The reason, I wish we could do that. So Google the instructions. How do I start these engines? The reason I couldn't get them to start had to do with my failure to turn on, quote, the two big white levers at the back of the pedestal, unquote. I'm sure they have a name, but my Google search result called them big white levers. I don't think we usually call them that.
No.
After moving these upwards, I had a successful engine start. What are these levers or levers, if you prefer, called? When are they moved during normal operations? Thanks, and great meeting you and your FO along with other Houston community members last year at El Real. Hope to catch you another time. I hope so too, Jacob. He said thanks. He's an ex-Acme operations agent. And he said, P.S. Addition to earlier message, by the way, I quite like your aircraft. In ways, it's more advanced than the 737, what shocked me mainly was the overhead annunciator panel, which even the newest 737 does not have. Just idiot lights, similar to an automobile. Safe travels. Okay, that was not from me. That was from Jacob. Don't get mad at me, all you 737 guys and gals. So, Dana, what are these two big white levers at the back of the pedestal called?
I believe he's talking about the pneumatic crossfeed levers.
I think you're right.
I think so too. That's what allows the air from the APU to the engines to allow the starters to engage and actually turn the engines over so they can start. We also use it for two other situations, and that is, of course, for air conditioning off of the APU. So it's the same ducting that comes off the APU. If those levers are closed, the APU can blow all the air it wants to, but the air would never get to the air conditioning packs. That's using the APU. The other thing that they are used for is for wing and tail de-ice. Well, really not the tail, but the wing de-ice mostly. So if you don't have those open, then the air would not be able to go to the leading edges of the wings to be able to de-ice the wings using hot air.
Very good. Yep. So basically, it's just a manifold back there with high pressure air from the, well, depends on whether we're talking about the 88 or the 9. We'll just stick with the 88. The 8th and 13th stages. The 8th is a lower compression stage, and the 13th is a high pressure, which augments depending on, if the pressure drops below a certain point. Or if you turn as Dana mentioned, the wing airfoil anti-ice, the high pressure stage air is used. So you have a lot of hot, high pressure air in this manifold, and these levers, all they do is just really, literally, there's a cable that goes from that center console all the way back to the tail area of the airplane where those valves are, moves those valves, and isolates that center part of the manifold, basically. So
yeah, there's a lot of hot air in a Mad Dog.
There is a lot of hot air in a Mad Dog, especially
Depends on who's flying it.
And another very interesting tidbit, I don't know if the simulator would actually do it, but if you were to pull one of the fire handles, you'd also see that pneumatic crossfeed valve lever would close.
Mm-hmm. I bet the simulator does show that. They're pretty accurate.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Anyways, there it is.
There it is. Pretty simple, actually. Okay. I think we can squeeze out another one before we get to the point where we're going to do the plane tail. So
Careful now.
Pardon me?
I said careful. I'm not sure what's
That
being
sounds like a bit of peristalsis at work there.
a little bit. Yeah.
Squeeze one out, huh?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not paying attention to the words I'm using.
It's okay. We are.
Yeah,
You are.
HR heard that.
The autopilot's on again.
Okay. Nolan writes in, hello, APG crew. I discovered you while my wife and I were driving back from EAA AirVenture 2017. We had a few hours to become accustomed to your voices on our road trip down to New Orleans. An aviation career has always been my dream since I was a kid. Yep. Oop. The beer's talking. Yep, that's me in the flight suit and helmet around age 5. I'll put these pictures in the show notes. And was solidified after taking my first plane ride with the EAA Young Eagles back in 1994 at the age of 9. Yet another embarrassing photo attached below. My parents even paid for me to take some sailplane lessons when I was 12, but the expense was too much at the time. After graduating from college in 2007, I started flight training but stopped after only 4 hours due to being sent on a foreign assignment to China. Finally, after returning to the States, I started training again in 2016 and picked up 7 hours until work once again got in the way, and off I went to another assignment away from home. Anyway, in 2017, I finally admitted to myself what my wife and family knew all along. I want to fly every day, all the time. My wife forced me to take vacation, and we went to AirVenture 2017 for inspiration. It worked. Then on the drive back home, I discovered you all. Captain Jeff with his dry humor, Captain Nick with his strange vernacular, Captain Dana with his roundabout path to the airlines, and Dr. Steph with her marathon running and general aviation escapades. It was nice to hear that I was not the only marathon runner who loves flying.
Woohoo.
Woohoo. We
Took
moved
me a minute to unmute there. Sorry.
That's okay. We moved to Houston at the end of 2017. Renovated a house for the first 8 months of 2018, and finally started flying again in October of 2018. This time I was flying with a real purpose, to turn my passion into a career. I have to say that without my wife being so supportive and also pushing me to follow my dream, I would not be working towards this new chapter in our lives. Well, I just want to pause for a moment. Wow, your wife is a very special person, Nolan, and you're very lucky to have her, just got to say. Okay, the scariest part of all of this was to be able to admit to others that I have this goal of flying for a living. It just sounds so ridiculous to say it out loud after dreaming about it for almost 30 years, but I'm going to be a professional pilot. I'm trying to transition slowly to my new life and plan on continuing to work at my current job as an engineer until I have my CFI. In the meantime, I will be flying at every opportunity as a part owner in a new to me 1966 Cherokee 140. I plan on having my PPL check ride by the end of January 2019, this month, and we'll jump straight into instrument and commercial. Thank you, Doctor, captains, and the APG community for helping me to realize that this dream can be a reality. Listening to so many people in similar situations of mid-career shifting has really helped pull me along. To be honest, I never thought I was going to solo, and I was a nervous wreck. But as my flight instructor was standing on the gear leg step and gave his last words of wisdom, "Takeoffs are optional, sir," and then proceeded to unplug his headset and ran aft from the big fan on the front of the 172, I knew that, worst case, I could always go around. I just want to tell you all, good luck. We're all counting on you. Sincerely, Iron Flyer. Not due to the aircraft I fly, but the triathlons I've been known to do. Wow. That is so awesome, Nolan, to hear your story. And you have received inspiration from others telling their story. And now you are going to be the one that is going to give inspiration to so many others listening to the show. And we can't wait to hear how this journey progresses. And certainly hope that you'll be able to make it to Oshkosh AirVenture this year, because we're all going to be there, and we look forward to meeting you personally.
I love that. This feedback is brilliant. We're going to take great joy from following Iron Flyer in his story. But it was his little comment there that his instructor said takeoffs are optional. So it wasn't that. It was the unsaid bit about the landings that I thought was so good.
Yes. They're not optional.
Well done.
Exactly. Yes.
Yes.
Must land eventually.
Uh-huh. What goes up must come down, basically.
Yeah, congratulations, Nolan. This is part of the reason why I even got involved with this podcast is so that I could share my story and maybe influence a few people to go ahead and take the chance and do or go after the dream that I always had. And it took me a long time to convince myself to do it, but I did it, and I absolutely have no regrets. So I really wish you the best on that, Nolan, and congratulations on taking the leap of faith. And a big hug to your wife, because I'll tell you what, if it wasn't for my wife being as supportive as she was, there would have been no way I could have done what I have accomplished. So we need, behind every good pilot is a good woman.
Oh, here,
Or man.
Dana.
Or
Definitely.
man. Or, that's what I was about to say. or nowadays, behind every good female pilot, they could and should be a man. Or, you never know.
Or just mix a match.
Someone supportive.
Someone supportive.
I would
There
just
you
like
go.
to echo
Or,
all of those comments and sentiments as well, Nolan. And I'm just glad that there's another marathon runner out there, so these guys won't think I'm quite so crazy anymore.
I won't do any good. We still think
Dang.
We
You're
still think he's crazy.
I think behind every good pilot, there's a nice dog.
That too.
I don't know what's behind me, but it's time now for the best part of the show. Yes.
Yippee!
The old pilot's plain tales this week. The title, The Widow Makers.
The Old Pilot's Plain Tales, The Widowmakers.
A few aircraft have earned the dubious honor of being named a Widowmaker. One of the most notorious was the Martin B-26 Marauder, a twin-engine bomber used in the Second World War by the Army Air Corps. It was designed with a rather small wing area and, as a result, suffered from unusually high wing loading, making it prone to stalling, particularly on the approach, and requiring a rather high landing speed of around 130 miles an hour, pretty fast for aircraft of that era. Early versions were grounded after several accidents on takeoff, landing, and just taxiing around as the gear had a tendency to collapse. Some modifications were made, but as inexperienced pilots were put into the cockpits, the accident rate grew. Rumors abounded that the Marauder was impossible to fly on one engine, so Colonel Jimmy Doolittle flew a demonstration from MacDill Army Field, making the point by both taking off and landing on only one engine. In 1942, aviation pioneer and company founder Glenn L. Martin was called before the Truman Committee, which was investigating defense contract abuse. The then Senator Harry S. Truman asked Martin why the B-26 had issues. When Martin responded that the wings were too short, Truman curtly asked why the design had not been changed. Martin replied that the plans were too far along and, besides, his company already had the contract. Truman's pointed response was, in that case, the contract would be cancelled. Martin corrected the problem by adding an additional 6 feet to the wingspan, uprating the engines, adding more armor and larger guns. The Marauder gained other nicknames, such as the Martin Murderer, the Flying Coffin, and the Flying Prostitute, so named because it was fast and had no visible means of support, referring to its small wings. However, despite its bad reputation, the 9th Air Force stated that it had the lowest combat loss rate of any U.S. aircraft used during the war. As difficult to fly and dangerous as this aircraft was, the one that usually springs to mind when the Widowmaker epitaph is quoted
is the original rocket ship, the Lockheed F-104 Starfighter. A product of Kelly Johnson's prodigious and mostly secret hotbed of aircraft design, the Skunk Works, the 104 was the very first Mach 2 fighter. Johnson had visited North Korea during the Korean conflict to ask serving fighter pilots about the kind of fighter they wanted. At the time, the USAF was equipped with the North American F-86 Sabre, which was being pitted against the MiG-15. Although the Sabre was larger and more complex, many pilots felt that the MiG was superior. When engaging from above, the MiG definitely held the advantage, but once in a turning fight, the situation evened itself out. The Sabre could do better in an instantaneous turn, but the MiG did well in sustained maneuvers and had a better climb performance. The MiG was also better armed, better armored, and more powerful. Kelly took away the feeling that the pilots wanted a small, simple aircraft with excellent performance. So armed, he returned to his smelly design hideaway and set about building a new generation of fighter. His team looked at many possible concepts, but to achieve the desired high performance, they chose a design that would have the best possible capabilities by wrapping the lightest, most aerodynamically efficient airframe possible around a single powerful engine. The engine they chose was the new General Electric J79, a turbojet of much improved performance in comparison with other contemporary designs. Around this engine, they built a slim, sleek, lightweight fuselage that would give a fantastic power-to-weight ratio. Lockheed presented the design to the Air Force in 1952, and they were interested enough to create a general operations requirement for a lightweight fighter to replace the North American F-100. Although 3 other companies had competing designs, Lockheed had an insurmountable lead and were granted a development contract for 2 prototypes, named the XF-104. The airframes progressed faster than the new engine, so the initial version was powered by a licensed version of the Armstrong Siddeley Sapphire built by Wright. This first flew on March the 4th, 1954, less than a year from when the contract was signed. The prototypes didn't fare particularly well. The first had gear retraction problems, and the second was destroyed a few weeks later during a gun firing trial. However, based on the initial flights, the next variant, the YF-104, was built with a lengthened fuselage, modified landing gear and intakes, and with the remarkable J79 engine. The design evolved with the airframe being strengthened and the addition of a ventral fin and work on the J79 afterburner, but eventually, in early 1958, the first F-104 was delivered to the 83rd Fighter Interceptor Wing. The aircraft looked fantastic. It was long and pencil thin, with a long sharp nose which jutted well in front of the cheek intakes and even further in front of the tiny wings. Whereas most jet fighters of this period used a swept or delta wing design, which gave a good compromise between aerodynamic performance, lift, and internal space for fuel and equipment, Kelly Johnson had gone in a different direction. He optimized his aircraft for supersonic flight, and having tested many shapes, he decided that the most efficient was a very small, straight, mid-mounted trapezoidal wing. That is, one that has a straight leading edge swept to the rear and a straight trailing edge swept forwards. The new wing design was extremely thin, with a thickness to chord ratio of only 3.36% and an aspect ratio of 2.45. The wing's leading edges were so sharp, a radius of 16/100ths of an inch, which is less than half a millimeter, that they presented a cut hazard to the ground crew, and protective guards had to be installed on the edges during maintenance. This was the sort of wing design that was being made for high-speed missiles, since they operated almost exclusively in the supersonic speed range. The wing was so thin, only 4 inches, that's 10 centimeters at its thickest point, it couldn't accommodate fuel tanks, landing gear, or internal weapons, which all had to be located in the slim fuselage. The hydraulic cylinders that operated the ailerons were a mere 1 inch, 25 millimeters thick. A wing of this type was always going to present problems in the low speed range, and being so highly loaded, it gave the aircraft an uncomfortably high landing speed, even after installing both leading and trailing edge flaps. Lockheed even went as far as developing a boundary layer control system that blew high-pressure air over the trailing edge flaps to increase their efficiency and reduce landing speeds. This system, however, proved to be a maintenance nightmare in service, and landing without it could be a harrowing experience. Mounted atop the single fin was the horizontal tail surface, being placed there to reduce inertia cross-coupling, a divergent effect that occurs when rapid rolling. Because the fin was only a little shorter than one of the wings, it could, when rudder was applied, cause a significant amount of lift, causing the aircraft to roll in the opposite direction to the rudder input. To counter this effect, the wings were canted downward with a 10-degree anhedral. The fuselage was also designed with supersonic flight in mind. It had a small frontal area, a high fineness ratio, and within this slim tube was packed a great deal of essential equipment, such as the cockpit, a powerful cannon, all the fuel, the landing gear, the engine, the avionics, and the radar. The upside of this skinny design was that the aircraft produced very little drag. It had exceptional acceleration, a brilliant rate of climb, and a very potent top speed. The downside was that it had a poor sustained turn performance, and when it did try to turn hard, the lift-induced drag became very high. Despite its problems, it proved to be a capable record winner. It was the first operational fighter capable of sustained speeds of greater than Mach 2. It was the first aircraft to simultaneously hold the world speed record of 1,404 miles an hour and the altitude record of 91,243 feet, a record that the C model broke when it reached 103,389 feet. It held a multitude of climb-to-height records. For example, it could reach 39,400 feet in under 100 seconds. The 104 was given a potent new gun in the M61 Vulcan 20mm cannon, which could fire 100 rounds a second. A 6-barrel Gatling gun, once the problem of feeding linked ammunition was cured, it became the mainstay of many aircraft and was subsequently fitted to a whole range of fighters. However, as other more capable aircraft made their appearance, the chances of a 104 being able to achieve a gun's kill became less and less likely. As a result, the gun was removed to make way for more fuel, recce cameras, or just to save weight. The other main weapon was the AIM-9 missile, a stern aspect heat seeker. It wasn't a long-range weapon, which meant the 104 was going to have to get in close to its adversaries, not an ideal situation for an aircraft with such a poor turn performance. However, much later on, some versions were fitted with the AIM-7 Sparrow, a beyond visual range radar-guided missile. Probably the most controversial aspect of the Starfighter's design was the pilot escape system. Concerned that an ejector seat might not clear the aircraft's T-tail, the initial versions used the Stanley C-1 seat, which fired the pilot downwards through a floor hatch. This obviously became a major hazard in low-level situations, and before long, 21 American pilots, including a test pilot, had been killed in low-altitude emergencies because of it. The C-1 seat was eventually replaced with a Lockheed C-2 seat, which fired upwards, but could only be used with at least 90 knots of forward speed to aid parachute deployment. Many export versions of the Starfighter were retrofitted with the Martin Baker Mark 700 seat. After only 3 months in service with the USAF, the 104 was grounded after a series of engine-related accidents, and orders for the aircraft shrank from 722 to a mere 155. And after a year, these aircraft were handed over to Air National Guard units. Subsequently, the F-104C entered service with the Tactical Air Command as a multi-role fighter and fighter bomber, and the aircraft did see service in Vietnam, although it engaged in little aerial combat and scored no air-to-air kills. It flew a total of 5,200 missions for the loss of 9 aircraft. By 1967, all the USAF Starfighter units were re-equipped with the F-4 Phantom. Just as the 104 was falling out of favor with American units, it became the aircraft of choice for the German Air Force, which was looking for a multi-role combat aircraft. In addition, the aircraft was purchased by Canada, Italy, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark, Greece, Turkey, Spain, Taiwan, and Japan. Many of these sales, however, were marred by a bribery scandal. The German Minister of Defense, Franz Josef Strauss, was accused of having received at least $10 million for West Germany's purchase of more than 900 starfighters, and the Prince Consort of the Netherlands was forced to resign from his position as the Inspector General of the Dutch Armed Forces for accepting a $1 million bribe. Other controversies occurred around Europe and in Japan. A Senate investigation revealed that the Lockheed board had paid $22 million in bribes to foreign officials, and the scandal nearly brought Lockheed down. Although many air forces had their fair share of problems with the 104, it was the German Air Force that seemed to suffer the most. Erich Hartmann, the world's top-scoring fighter ace and commander of one of Germany's first post-war squadrons, even before the Starfighter's introduction, deemed the 104 to be an unsafe aircraft with poor handling characteristics for aerial combat and unfit for Luftwaffe use. The aircraft was undoubtedly a handful. Takeoff speeds were around 190 knots. It flew around the circuit or instrument pattern at over 200 knots and landed at an eye-watering 180 knots. And high power had to be maintained to keep the boundary layer control working. In addition, it commonly suffered engine failures on takeoff and afterburner blowouts. It could develop wingtip oscillations that in one case sheared a wing completely off. A spurious stick pusher activation at low level killed one pilot, so it was common for others just to turn it off. It had a problem with asymmetric flap deployment and nose wheel shimmy that was so severe it could flip the aircraft onto its back. This, combined with a less than perfect training regime, maintenance being conducted by conscripted military personnel, the poor German weather, and the demands of a low-level fighter-bomber role caused an appalling accident rate. The first crash occurred before the aircraft was a month old, and the bad start continued when, in June 1962, 4 F-104s practicing for an introduction into service display crashed in formation, killing all 4 pilots. These were just some of the 292 German F-104s to crash. The German Navy lost 30% of its aircraft. 116 pilots died, and grieving widows sued Lockheed. More than 30 of them received 3 million Deutschmarks each. In 1966, Johannes Steinhoff took over command of the Luftwaffe and grounded the entire Luftwaffe and Bundesmarine F-104 fleet until he was satisfied that problems had been resolved or at least reduced. The damage, however, had been done. The starfighter was now being called the Widowmaker, but other countries had their own name for it. The Italians called it the Flying Coffin, and the Canadians, who crashed 46% of their inventory, named it the Lawn Dart or the Aluminium Death Tube. There was no doubt that the F-104 was a demanding aircraft to fly, but after a few years of hard-bought experience, the accident rates generally dropped to match other fighter types of the period that were less maligned. But that was too late to save the aircraft's reputation. I, for one, though, always admired the sleek lines of an aircraft that seemed to be streaking along at Mach 2, even when parked on the flight line. For me, it was the original rocket ship, and I greatly admired it. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a review at Apple Podcast.
I think we all thought that that thing was an amazing looking airplane.
Oh, it was so futuristic, Jeff, wasn't it, for its time? 1952, it was just a few years after the Second World War, when Kelly Johnson and the geniuses that were in the Skunk Works started working on that airplane. And they really built something that was, would not have looked out of place 100 years later, streaking out into outer space. I thought it was a fabulous looking airplane, but sadly, completely the wrong design for an aircraft that was going to be a fighter bomber and an interceptor, etc. It was, I thought, a bit of an exercise in what can we do with a design rather than actually designing an aircraft that was fit for purpose.
I was kind of surprised that Kelly, in your story, you talk about Kelly Johnson going and actually talking with the fighter pilots and trying to determine what is it that they want. Perhaps they were not thinking clearly when they said they wanted a fighter that would do Mach 2, but not have the performance necessary to, do any of those close-in dogfighting maneuvers that you're going to, fast is good, but you got to be also maneuverable. Yeah,
it's funny that the F-104's favored tactic, in my experience, fighting them in peacetime, but very much nation versus nation. When we fought the Germans and the Italians in their 104s when I was still in the Air Force, their tactic was to use fighter controllers to bring them into a stern position, and then they would cream down from very high altitude at incredibly high speed for stern attacks, which was something that the Korean pilots had suffered to a certain extent during the Korean War. That was the MiG's favorite tactic, but it was just one tactic out of what should be a playbook of multiple tactics. But I think Kelly Johnson might have misunderstood a little and developed an aircraft that was designed around a single tactic, when in fact what it should have been was a much more roundly designed fighter.
Nick and I were talking both before the show and during this, and it's amazing that the F-104, first of all, one of the things that was interesting about it is that when Nick was flying F-4s, he mentioned that the F-104 was one of the few aircraft he could outmaneuver in the F-4, which says a lot.
Easily outmaneuver.
Yeah. It says a lot about the quality of the maneuverability of the F-4. But the other thing is that Kelly Johnson, who's such an amazing designer. I mean, he designed the P-38, he designed the C-130, he designed the U-2, and the SR-71. And he would design the F-104, which was such a dog.
Which one of those did he design first?
The P-38 would have been the earliest one.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just, it kind of strikes me as almost like there was just inexperience put into it. It was like you've said, it's something that looks interesting. It it fulfilled some wish lists that pilots had, but it just wasn't perhaps as well thought out as it should have been, and perhaps that was because of inexperience in building and designing aircraft of this type to begin with.
Yeah, you're quite right, Steph. It was the first step into a supersonic fighter, but it was only really designed to work well in the supersonic speed range. And that's completely impractical.
Yeah.
Really, you've got to be able to have a machine that will do everything. And because when you end up low speed, inevitably, you need to have an aircraft that will maneuver and working close and have authority over the nose and keep its energy. So it needed to be a better all-rounder. Richard Bell in the chat room says, did they refer to the 104 as the missile with a man in it? Very much so. That was the manufacturer's sort of strap line for the aircraft. It didn't stick because, of course, it developed much more distinctive nicknames. But they would have loved to have kept that. And it's rather telling that the design of the aircraft very much resembled that of a missile. And a missile inevitably is supposed to be only a supersonic weapon because, it's got to accelerate to a huge speed and it has to be able to maneuver supersonically and have very low drag. And supersonic performance and subsonic performance are two completely different things. And, we don't realize now that the 104 was built for perhaps the wrong era. And what's more, it only sold well, perhaps, certainly because of the scandal concerning the amount of bribery that went on, inducing nations to buy it.
But you've also got to remember that this was a time of the Century series, and it was early on in the development of jets. And the Century series included the F-100, the F-102, 103, the Delta Dagger, Delta Dart, the 104, and the 105. And in most cases, they were all not great aircraft. There was a time when we were designing aircraft that were set up to intercept missiles, high speed, and get in the air, and some dogfighting and intercepting bombers and stuff. But we were just learning about flying jets and flying supersonically. And none of those aircraft lasted a particularly, well, the 105 lasted a while, but the rest of them were pretty much one and done.
The sad thing about the 104 was, though, that it claimed so many pilots' lives.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say the Canadians lost 46% of
Yeah,
theirs?
it's an amazing
That's crazy.
statistic.
Yeah.
Nearly half of your entire inventory of aircraft. That's just unbelievable.
I kind of chuckled when you referred to some of the other nicknames it had. The Flying Coffin, which in recent times we've used that nickname for the A-10 Thunderbolt. And the other one, the Lawn Dart, which we here in the States always refer to the F-16 as the Lawn Dart.
Yeah. These things do have a tendency to skip generations, and it's like people think, "Oh, that's a clever name," without realizing that it's been there before. Mm-hmm. The Widowmaker was very much associated with the Marauder of the Second World War, and although it became appropriate for the 104, people were just reinventing the wheel.
Well, another great plain tale. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And I have to mention Miklos, who was one of the gentlemen, one of our lovely listeners who asked us, I'm assuming it's gentleman because I'm not quite sure what the name Miklos is, Christian name, surname, not sure, off in our chat room. Who suggested the 104 as a good plain tale. But he wasn't the only one who thought that might make a good subject, but thanks very much indeed.
Excellent. We have a great community, don't we?
Oh, for sure.
All right. David writes, while discussing the pilot at Zurich, who unfortunately felt the need to use disrespectful language to the air traffic controller, it got me wondering, in U.S. airspace, pilots dread the call from ATC, quote, advise when ready to copy this telephone number. Do European controllers do the same? Does that phrase give the pilot a similar sense of doom as we feel? As airline crew, what is your company's policy or procedure when you get that call? If you're on the ground, do you return the call before departing? If the message comes in the air, do you call during the next ground turn or wait until you're done flying for the day? or maybe wait until the next year. Probably not a good thing to do. Anyway, love your show. I added that last part. Cheers, David. And he said, P.S. for your info, I'm a San Diego commercial rated pilot, though I don't fly for a living, and volunteer for Civil Air Patrol. That's awesome. Thank you, David. So, Nick, I think that you're the only one that really can answer this. What happens in Europe when you get that, or do you ever hear that from a European controller? Do they say, would you write down this telephone number and give us a call?
No, we don't.
Okay.
As far as I'm aware, it's not a thing we do or have ever been asked to do, and it certainly doesn't have the same connotation that it would do in the States. Occasionally, I've asked for the air traffic supervisor's number if I want to have a whinge at a way of I've been controlled, and it's oh really, oh okay, and then they give me a number. I've never had it really done in the opposite direction. It certainly, I can see there's a system in the States where this is the beginning of what will be a form of investigation. But in the UK, we tend to do these things via air safety reports and ASR. So if an air traffic controller feels that there has been a flight safety risk or infringement, he will raise an air safety report, and the authorities will look at that, and they will talk to everyone involved if they think it's serious enough, and they'll come up with a finding. But it's very much a non-threat thing. It's done purely under the umbrella of flight safety. There's no implication that you'll have your license affected. It just doesn't seem to happen in the same way. Over here, it's like the sword of Damocles. When I say over here, I'm in the States at the moment. So it's like the sword of Damocles hanging over you. And if you get that call, then someone's just started cutting the thread, and that sword may plunge down, which I think is a very negative way. If you've got a conflict with a procedure, or you feel you might have overstepped the mark somewhere, then a discussion certainly might be required. But I hate the idea that that will lead to possibly a loss of your license, because that is not an unthreatening thing, and that does not generate a feeling that you will share your problems, mishaps, your mistakes. It sounds like you're now being put in front of a court, and that, for me, that goes completely against the grain of the concept of a no threat reporting environment. When we work so hard to generate that, I don't like it. So no, the answer is in the UK and Europe, that doesn't really exist.
I guess that phone call now serves in a lot of cases to be the first indication that something may have happened, and might be something that you need to fill out a report and kind of cover your bases, so that you don't face negative certification action, and not that you're going to automatically have your certificate pulled. It's just like, okay, this is what happened. We see a violation here, and just giving you a heads up, we're going to be reporting this. And then you take the time to fill out a NASA report or a ASAP, or both, actually. And then, as long as you weren't being negligent or doing something purposely, willfully wrong, you are going to be protected. But I agree with you. It's. I mean, we made steps to make it less. What's the word?
Contentious.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not the right word. Less
threatening.
Threatening. Yeah, that's a good word.
But we've talked about this before. The safety culture, and in fact, Pip did a really nice episode a while back regarding that very thing, and that if we're in this, this business together, and our goal is to make it as safe as we can, then having a threatening environment is not a good thing. It's counterproductive, and Anyway, that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, Josine in the chat room asked if the ASRs in Europe are published. Well, to tell the truth, I'm not sure. I certainly get a certain number of them highlighted to me via my company flight safety people and through other publications like Chirp, which is a confidential reporting system we have in the UK. But I'm sure there is a way to get them all, but I personally don't access them. There'll probably be too many for me to ever worry about. I just tend to trust the people who want to keep me advised, basically my company flight safety department, and read those. That's probably enough, because there's plenty of those to look through, I promise you.
All right. Well, thank you, David, for the feedback. And we'll continue to move on here to item number 10 from either Michelle or Michael. Your choice. Hello, APG crew. Here's an interesting article. Besides the story itself, note the pic of a 747, and the article describes the plane as a 787-9. I assume they mean the 787-9 Dreamliner. Actually, they refer to the plane as a 789. I don't, in what I'm looking at, I didn't see the picture of the 747, but that must be in the full article. But anyway, so.
Yeah, it is. I just pulled up the full article. The first picture is a 747.
Gotcha. Okay. So this story, let's see, sources have described an emergency landing to the Cairns airport as a comedy of errors after paramedics were unable to reach the body of a man who died on board mid-flight. An Air New Zealand flight, number 80, flying from Hong Kong to Auckland, New Zealand, was diverted to Cairns International Airport about 2:30 a.m. on Monday. After it was understood, a male passenger died on board the Boeing 789 after suffering a medical emergency. It's not known exactly how the passenger died. According to the Cairns Post, airport sources told the publication that the drama on board the plane continued after it landed, describing the emergency situation as a comedy of errors because no ground crew were available to assist in the removal of the body at that time of the morning. It is understood that due to the time of day, accessing the aircraft became problematic while the plane sat on the tarmac. According to an airport source who spoke to the Cairns Post, the pilot of the aircraft didn't want passengers to use an aerobridge and risk seeing the deceased body. So instead, the crew sourced a set of stairs for the aircraft, but what arrived were too small. They found a small set of air stairs, which they put up to the aircraft door. They were totally insufficient. The paramedics had to put their kit on top of those stairs and stand on that, and they were still only chest high to the door. They had to climb onto the aircraft to attend to that matter. It's understood that the paramedics had to remove the body from the aircraft via the stairs. Ooh. An Air New Zealand spokesperson said in a statement to news.com.au that there had been a medical emergency on board the aircraft. So I don't know. I'm not sure I understand the decision to do this just to kind of prevent. I mean, I'm wondering if the way this person died, maybe it was like a very physical. Steph, help us out here. Do you think? I mean, what normally a dead person looks like they're just sleeping, but is there something more to this than we don't know?
I have no idea.
Maybe the flight attendant just got so upset because she didn't get a good tip that she took something and just beat him up on the head and just made a bloody mess. And
Yeah,
nobody wanted to
I'm
see
trying to think of reasons why you would want to, and certainly I don't work for the airlines, but my understanding was that this does occasionally happen. People pass away for various reasons, and it can happen in flight. Not necessarily because of anything related to the flight itself, but sometimes it's just someone's time. And in those cases, usually you continue to your intended destination. There's not a reason to divert somewhere. It's not going to change the outcome for the deceased passenger. It's not going to, I can't imagine it would help out in any way in terms of facilitating returning that person to family, loved ones by diverting a whole flight. I don't know, unless there was felt to be some sort of hazard to other passengers.
It
And
kind of
I
reminds me.
don't.
Remember that story in Portugal where the guy had
Yeah, the guy who had the
some kind of a disease, like his flesh eating.
yeah, the necrotizing skin
Yes.
disease and the very foul odor because
Mhm.
of it. That could be a reason. Perhaps if there was something that happened that caused there to be bodily fluids involved. I don't know.
Yeah.
But don't you guys have procedures for what happens if someone dies on board? I mean, I remember, Nick, you mentioned it. Well, actually, I remember you mentioning it in Farnborough, but I'm sure that Dana, Jeff, aren't there procedures for what to do if you have a passenger that passes away?
Yeah, we just open up the door, throw them out.
Yeah, I was gonna say, put them in the ejection sheet.
Yeah,
Ejection
we
seat.
have a special chute. In fact, we have some old ship's canvas, and we wrap them in that and we zip it up with a thread, and we always put a needle through the nose just to make sure they're really dead. If they
This is all
put them in the chute and fire them off.
Not quite dead.
Yeah.
I'm not dead yet. You will be soon.
Exactly. But I have to agree with you, Steph and Jeff. This is probably a thing I would not have considered doing. Throwing into an airport like Cairns, which is not a major city. It's a nice place. Don't get me wrong; it's a lovely place. But just down the coast is Brisbane. A little further is Sydney. These are sort of international hubs where if there's a port health issue, then they are well equipped to deal with it. I'm not sure Cairns is in the same category. Darwin, just a little bit to the west and a bit further north, is probably equally better placed. So why the captain decided to throw into Cairns, I don't know. Our general procedure is, although the cabin crew are not equipped to declare someone officially dead, and neither is a doctor on board, we usually are well aware of when a passenger has passed away, and we don't leave any doubt. It's not as if we won't try every measure we can to save someone's life, or continue life where it's possible. Eventually, we run out of resources. And if someone has definitely passed away, there's not a great urgency to land the airplane. And if the person is still thought to be alive, that's a different matter. If there's a chance they might survive, then yes, of course, you get them to the nearest decent facility. But sometimes that's actually on board. If the person's had a heart attack, they may be best dealt with on board, and diverting to somewhere where there are no decent facilities at all, and then they'll need to be moved on elsewhere, is self-defeating diversion.
So you don't land at Shiraz in Iran, and
not unless they've got a damn good heart hospital or whatever it is you need. And that's why we have all these great communications and these facilities set up so that we get advice on where good places to divert is. But if the person's definitely passed away, and there's no doubting it, then what's the point? Our usual procedure is to either leave the person where they are if there's, if it's not crammed full, or if we do need to move the deceased, then move them into a galley where there's space and the body can be kept discreetly. But we don't have any special morgue on board the aircraft, so it's a matter of making do. But I'm not sure what the logic was.
I suspect that there's more to the story that they're not.
Yeah,
revealing.
there has to be more to the story, and I suspect the most likely thing is that perhaps it was an active resuscitation until the time when they actually got close to landing or landed, and were not successful in those efforts. Perhaps that makes the most sense to me.
Yeah, but if we're considering a diversion to save someone's life, the facilities at that airport, do they have the ability to get up to the aircraft and access the door is one of those things we need to know.
Is a pretty big criteria.
Yeah, exactly right. Do they have
The thing about it is, though, it basically what I'm reading, maybe reading between the lines, is that they did have a jet bridge or aero bridge or whatever you want to call it that would work with this particular airplane, but the pilot made the decision to, before we do that, we're going to have somebody come out with these other stairs and take the body off before we deplane the passengers.
no, in my experience, what we have to do is to make sure if you're going to park against a jetway, that there is a tow bar available to push the aircraft back, because there are so many different types of aircraft and versions that most airports don't have every single kind of tow bar that you could imagine. So having parked up against a terminal to facilitate the removal of the person or the body, you may then find yourself stuck there until someone can fly in a suitable tow bar, because the airport doesn't possess one. And airports are notorious for saying, oh yeah, we've got in my case, an A340 tow bar. So you go, okay, great. You park, and when it pitches up, it's an A340-300 tow bar, and we're flying an A340-600. And lo and behold, it doesn't fit.
Just use reverse. You can do that.
Yeah, exactly right. So, all this is going through your mind, whilst obviously your intention is to do the very best you can for the person that's having the difficulty. You've got to bear in mind the fact that if you put into a small airfield with 350 odd people, that will, if you can't move again because there's no tow bar there, you've got hotel accommodation, you've got all the discomfort and the problems that will evolve from there. You may, you may have saved someone's life, or you may have, just have the problem of taking off a body. But then once that's done and dusted, you then have to try and work out what to do for the rest of the passengers. And if you find yourself jammed up against a terminal and you can't move again, that's a damn nightmare.
Well, Tristan in our chat room makes a couple of points. First of all, apologies. I was mispronouncing Cannes. Like the one in France, maybe? Cannes? No, but apparently you don't pronounce the R.
It's been a few years in Australia. We used to call it Cairns, but
okay.
I'll doff my hat and bow to
I don't know.
Well, it sounded like you were putting less emphasis on the R than I was, but I'm American. We're like
Well,
pirates.
you're always emphasis on the first syllable, aren't you?
No,
No.
not really. No, if you're from the South, yes, but
Yeah, he did say it sounds like cans.
Okay. Con, maybe.
No,
Well, anyway,
cans,
the other thing that he mentioned is that they do see wide bodies quite often, and he believes that 787s go in there routinely. So, I mean, that could be a point there. It's really hard to tell from this article exactly what the captain was thinking and why he made the decision to do this. I don't know.
And the question about this particular story, I think, is, was it a medical emergency where they were trying to divert in order to help the passenger, or were you talking about a deceased passenger and you're dealing with someone who had already passed? In which case, why did they divert? Why didn't they just continue on to where they were going?
That's what I'm thinking. That's why I'm thinking that there's more to the story here. There's something really bad that happened here that they didn't want the passengers to see, and they didn't want to deal with anymore.
It's what someone might call a bloody mess.
It might be, yes. Maybe his head popped off.
Liz wonders how far the flying time between Brizzy and Cairns is. I don't know, about an hour, probably.
Looks like even longer. I don't know.
Perhaps an hour and a bit.
Brisbane, you mean? Okay.
Brisbane,
all the way to Auckland, the destination.
No, between Brisbane and Cairns.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
estimates ranging from
Cairns
30
has
minutes
got-
to 2 hours.
Okay.
In the chat room.
Cairns has got 10,000 feet of runway, so it's big enough to take it. And obviously, it can take and does take big aircraft. But something went wrong here. You're quite right, Jeff. There's a little bit. There's a few wrinkles to this story we don't know about.
Right. Oh well, maybe somebody will be able listening here will be able to tell us if you know some more information about this. Let us know, because inquiring minds want to know. We have some more audio feedback. This is from Logan, and Here
Is
we
she
go.
the guy with the sharp fingernails?
I think it's
Wolverine.
He's got an airport in Boston.
Oh, okay. That's where I landed. That's the bloke. Yeah.
or it could be the guy that was in Logan's Run.
Oh yeah. Perhaps he's running
he's a
around the airport.
marathoner.
Yeah.
All right.
Here we go.
Hello, APG crew. This is Logan Lynch, aka Lima Sierra Lima, coming to you from a chilly Killdeer, North Dakota. First off, I want to say I love the show. I look forward to a new episode every week. You're all awesome, simply put. It definitely brightens up my week to hear aviation news and listen to others' feedback. So right now I currently work for we'll call it a dull colored package delivery company. I've been working for them for almost 4 years now. I'm also currently a private pilot with about 100 hours. Right now I'm kind of stuck deciding what I want to do with aviation. I always grew up dreaming of being a pilot, whether that be for a passenger airline, flying cargo, flying island hopping in the Bahamas and whatnot. But ultimately, I'm not entirely sure what I want to do. I would love to fly for the current company I work for, flying MD-11s or even the Airbus A300s that we have in our fleet. But in the long run, I want to always enjoy flying and not just think of flying as a job. So I'm curious, your take. Do you all still love flying, or is it a job? Or what is your take on it? I did just turn 30 on Christmas Day. So I know I still have plenty of time to make an airline career if that's ultimately what I end up deciding. But getting to the airline and the path I should take to get there is puzzling to me. Being a CFI hasn't really ever appealed to me, but I know the many benefits of becoming a CFI. But for some reason, teaching and the thought of sending students on solo flights gives me anxiety. I've recently started exploring the possibilities of a military career. I am currently in talks with a recruiter from the Air Force Reserve and talking about joining out here in North Dakota. So I guess more or less, I'm looking for all of your feedback and advice on how I should decide what I want to do in the future. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this. Again, I enjoy your show every week. And blue skies and tailwinds to you all. This is Logan Lynch.
Well, thanks for the feedback, Logan. I think the answer to your first question regarding, or the concern that you have for making this something that you love to do, I think that the most important thing is your attitude, regardless of what airline you're flying, what kind of airplane, where you are in the world doing it. It's all about attitude. And that goes to any job, really. So that's what I would have to say about that. What do you all think, crew?
Well, I mean, I think this, that I think Logan is in the chat room with us. So hi, Logan.
Good.
Yeah, we've certainly talked lots of times about different ways to reach those goals. You don't see yourself being a CFI. That's fine. There's a lot of different ways to accumulate hours. And I know we can list off a lot of those. You can be a jump pilot. You can be a ferry pilot. You can do pipeline patrol. You could do aerial survey work. You could do, I mean, if you can imagine it, you can do it. I see Dana nodding his head, and he wants to jump in here and add his 2 cents with recommendations and advice.
I will. I will. Just continue.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know we've talked about it a whole lot, but I think probably you have a lot to add to this. So I'm gonna.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts are, as you got to go forward, and if it's something that you've always wanted to do, you can find a way to do it. Logan, I've mentioned it numerous times over and over again. Is that I've been shut off this buzzing because everybody seems to be talking on my phone here as it keeps on buzzing. Anyways, Logan, you got to do what makes you happy. There are numerous other ways of building time without being a CFI. I heard that you have the anxiety of actually signing somebody off to go solo. You're young enough that you can almost do anything you want to. Don't know about the military route. I think you're pushing the age limit there. For some reason, that's kind of sticking in my mind. 30 years old, maybe pushing it for flying. Not sure. Certainly talk to recruiter.
That was one of the messages that you just got. Rick Bell in the chat room says,
Rick Bell says,
Air Force, was that reserve? Currently entertaining age waivers as old as 37.
I guess.
Okay, so yeah.
Yeah,
it doesn't mean that they're allowing them yet. But anyways, it's expensive to get into it. There are the good old days when you could fly checks. That's pretty much dried up. But certainly tour banding is still an option. Ag work is still an option. Finding somebody to fly commercial with that your local FBO, that's always a possibility. Sit right seat on some aircraft. There are numerous ways that you can do it without having to go to the flying or the flight instructor route. But ultimately, you have to make the decision how fast you want to become an airline pilot. 30 years old, as you mentioned, is not old. There's a lot of opportunity. At 30, you still have 35 years available to work in this business, and that's more than enough time. If you started today at an airline, 35 years is a long time. And Jeff, he's just celebrated his 30th.
Just picked up my pin today.
Just picked up your pin. So there you go, 30 years, and still has another 5 years. So it's 35 years. So he will have been flying for Acme by the time he retires. So, there's a lot of room for you to go ahead and at the age of 30 to go ahead and live that dream if that's what you want to do and wish to do. How the best way to go about it, I can't tell you.
I would say, I think he mentioned right now he's private pilot with 100 hours. So keep working towards those ratings for right now. That's a good place to start. And, as much as you can, keep flying.
Yeah, and that's the thing is law of recency. Get it done as quickly as you possibly can. Don't do what I did. I mean, I dwelled on it for years. I flew 5-10 hours here, there, everywhere from all through my 20s, and I finally said, I'm never going to get anywhere if I just dwell and just sit here and do 5-10 hours a year. It's not going to happen. So, if you're going to commit, you got to go all in and just go for it and, try to build up time and experience as quickly as you possibly can, because I'll tell you what, I mean, the shortage, there's no question that it is here now. The other thing you can look at, I know I haven't mentioned it in a while, but I've heard rumors, I don't know if they're true or not, but ab initio programs into some of the regionals.
Mhm.
They're looking at people based on experience, and that's another thing. I know at Acme they've now announced something very similar to that, and even the carrier that you're talking about, you may want to pop your head into the chief pilot's office or talk to a couple pilots and see if they have any type of program that they're entertaining now internally within the company that would help you to excel in the way that you're looking to move forward and become a pilot for even that company. So,
And can I just mention that, and I can't remember what episode it was, but First Officer Stephen did a fabulous piece of feedback about 15 minutes long on how he built hours and offering suggestions on how to build hours in order to get a job like that. And maybe we can find out what episode that was in and put it in the show notes. But that would be a good piece of feedback for Logan to listen to in terms of where to go and how to go for his hours with that.
That's a great idea, Micah. Since you're a guest host, that'll be your task, and you tell me what episode it is.
That'll teach you.
Yeah, I'll offer a lot of other suggestions.
Delegation.
Hey, Steven, if you're listening, can you remind us which episode that was?
I do remember it. I just don't remember what episode. But
I was not talking to you, Siri. Thank you. She said, I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah, well,
there's lots of resources out there too, Logan. There's certainly a lot of, you have to take some of these things with a grain of salt, but there are good networks out there on social media platforms for people who are in the same boat and have or have recently done what you're trying to do and can give lots of advice or let you know what's current and happening and what some of the options are, reasonable options. And there can be a good place to get ideas for things you may not have thought of before as well. Because like I said, there's probably more things to do than we can actually think of here and name. So
did Logan happen to mention, I can't remember in the feedback, where he's from, where he lives generally?
Don't think he did.
I don't think he did
North
either.
Dakota, I think.
No, yeah. You're right. North Dakota.
Yeah, so, not a whole lot going on. I mean, I was hoping he's living more towards the coast because one of the quickest ways to build time now is to Manitou,
but if that might mean just moving to an area where they do that kind of thing. I mean, as you said, there's a will. If there's a will, there's a way.
Absolutely.
And no matter how you do it, there's so many different ways to do it, so many doors to get to where you want to go. And then once you get there, as I said, this is an amazing career that I've had and I'm still continuing to enjoy, but there are still people that have been doing it as long as I have that are kind of miserable doing it. And I think it's mostly because they just don't have the right attitude.
You think they would be miserable doing any job?
Yes, I do.
They're not happy in life.
140 days.
Pay no attention to
a good example for you right there.
Completely miserable.
And
that's honestly one of the things I've mentioned before. I mean, that's what I enjoy. Why I enjoy being captain now is because I get to set the tone.
Yeah,
and I like the positive. I truly despise flying with these people that had nothing but bad things to say.
All these first officers. Yeah.
Well, first officers, but I get to set the tone now. When I was flying with captains,
he may not want to follow it.
Well, true, but whatever.
Anyway, I think we gave him some good tips, good advice, and Logan, I hope that you continue with your goal and let us know what you decide to do, because everybody can benefit from that. And finally, Kevin writes in and says, thanks so much for the work you put into your podcast. It's super enjoyable to listen to, informative and encouraging to hear.
Is he talking about our podcast?
Yeah, I think so. Wait a minute.
Okay.
Oh, wait, no. He entitled it to the Airplane Geeks, I think.
I'll just turn the mic off. Sorry about that.
I think he sent it to the wrong one. Darn it. Well, we're going to pretend it was sent to us. So anyway, he says, thanks for so much for all the work we put into the podcast. It's super enjoyable to listen to, informative, and encouraging to hear all your stories and tales. Happy New Year. This again is from Kevin Egan. You're welcome, Kevin. And, honestly, we do it because we're selfish and we enjoy doing this. It's a lot of fun. We get to hang out with good friends every week and talk about flying and other stuff. So, it's just our excuse to be able to do this every week. But we appreciate the fact that you appreciate it. And again, if you all appreciate this and you have you appreciate it so much you want to give us some money, over to airlinepilotguy.com/coffee and join the Coffee Fund cadre. But you don't have to, obviously. It's just a labor of love for us, and we'd do it if we didn't get a cent. So
true. And Liz said episode 335 on Steven's feedback.
Okay. Is that the feedback that you're referring to, or? Okay.
Yeah, Stephen Ivy.
Okay.
With his
when he finished his 1,500 hours. Awesome.
Yep.
Awesome. Very good.
Great.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Liz.
Okay. Well, so again, head over to airlinepilotguy.com, the wonderful website there, where you can find out about schedules and meetups and merchandise and Coffee Fund and the crew and the community and so much more. You guys can't see me because my video is still not working, but my arms are going like crazy here. I'm just, amazing, like an Italian. And we have apps for your iPhone and your Android devices at the respective app stores. Just do a search for Airline Pilot Guy. They're free and no ads, and it's a great way to keep in touch with the show and the community. And we're also on social media, which is probably the very best way to keep in touch with everything.
It is. You can head over to twitter.com using the handle at APG Crew. Find out what's happening with the community there. Interact with us in 280 characters or less. If you're a little more long-winded, maybe head over to facebook.com/airlinepilotguy. You can share articles and stories there. You can chat with community members. You will get interaction with us from time to time, and information about meetups and so much more. And that also leads us into Slack.
Yes, the guy that's in charge of our Slack team, the APG Slack team, Hillel.
APG listeners, please join us on our Slack team. Slack is a communication, coordination, and sharing platform that works on your mobile, laptop, or browser. On Slack, we share ideas and news. We suggest episode and Plain Tales topics. We plan events and meetups. To get into the Slack team, please email me at slack@airlinepilotguy.com. That's SLACK, Sierra Lima Alpha Charlie Kilo @airlinepilotguy.com, or send me a tweet with your preferred email address to @Hillel, and I'll send you an invitation. That's Hillel, spelled HI11E1, Hotel India 11 Echo 1, and see you in Slack.
And another big thanks to our producer, Liz, for helping us prepare for these shows and sorting out feedback. And she's awesome.
Keeping us on track.
Awesome.
By the way, I should have mentioned this at the very beginning, but I'm going to mention it now. I didn't forget. Liz was the special guest on the PTUK podcast, the last episode.
Love that show.
Yeah,
Liz
represented us well. So thank you, Liz, for doing that. And so check it out, PTUK, Plain Talking UK. And until next time, wishing you clear skies, unlimited visibility, and tailwinds. Take care and God bless.
Cheers, y'all.
Hi, everybody.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
See you guys. Have a great time. Great day.
That's not funny.
Where did that come from?
I don't know.
It comes from the cartoon Jeff. 'Cause the real Jeff wouldn't have done that.
Shut up, Jeff.
Shut up, Jeff. Shut up.
Shut up, Jeff.
That says that so well.
What?
You say that so well.
Shut up, Jeff.
Yeah, you must say it a lot under your breath.
Shut up,
I
Jeff.
do.
Shut up, Jeff.
Shut up, Jeff.
Or this is one of my favorites. All right. Well, that was fun. Thanks, Micah, for driving all the way down and joining us today. That was a lot of fun.
So much for having having me. This was just great. I love you guys. I love the show, and it's so great to see Nick. I haven't seen him since Pittsburgh, and it's just so wonderful to be here with him, farts and all.
Guten fart.
Guten fart.
Guten fart.
There's nothing quite like a guten fart.
No, that's true.
And I just want to point out one. We're off the air, but I want to point this out to you. I don't know if you guys
Nope.
saw the
Still on the air. Mike.
Still on the air.
So careful.
Off the show.
The show's over.
Yeah, it's not the show. Okay.
In the chat room, Logan was there, and Logan's in the chat room. But there's somebody else from North Dakota saying, "Here's my email address. I may have a job for you. Write me." It just shows what kind of a community we have.
Oh,
Is that
no, that
unbelievable?
would be unbelievable. If
I
that
did not
worked,
see
I didn't even,
wouldn't that
see,
be
I'm
cool?
skeptical that North and South Dakota really even exist in the first place. So
That's
stretching things a little bit here, huh?
They exist. I've been there.
Okay.
They're
If you
real
say so.
places. You're saying?
I don't know. I've
Just watch that show, Fargo. You'll see it all.
I've seen Fargo. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love the original movie. That's
The movie's
fantastic.
great, and the TV series is really good too.
Well, I
the
don't
TV
know.
series.
A lot of people don't like Ewan McGregor.
Oh well, is that which season is that? Because they each.
Oh, no, they just said his accent wasn't very realistic.
Well, yeah, I'm sure that they're all kind of fake. Just like here in the South, when we hear somebody try to do a Southern accent, you go, no, that's not.
Yeah, you betcha.
Like
you know,
that.
don't you know?
Issues.
Don't you know?
Don't you know? Although
But y'all fix
They're
it.
gonna get
I
hate
have
mail
heard
from North Dakota.
I have heard
Yeah.
some people like flight attendants that are based in Minneapolis, and I'm thinking to
Oh, it's
myself,
pretty similar.
oh, they're putting like this accent on just to be funny, and then I realize, oh no, they're not. That's really their accent. So I mean, not everybody, just some of them. Guess it
What
depends on
show
where you're
was this? Three something or other?
357.
357.
357. Yeah.
Just checking. 357.
Yeah.
I've stopped my recorder, you see.
Oh, I should
You
do that too.
should.
Stop my recorder.
Post podcast checklist. 1. Stop
It's a shutdown.
recording.
Okay, thank you.
Remember that one comes after
Shut
you've
down
had all the
checklist.
fun.
2. Send recording audio files.
Yeah.
To ebook. Okay.
It sounded like maybe it was just me, but it sounded like the audio from Nick and Micah at a couple points was kind of stuttering a bit.
Oh no, that was us.
Yeah, we're
Stuttering.
old men. We just stutter anyway.
Yeah, it was the bandwidth, I think, because I didn't hear it from Steph, nor did I.
I
hear it
didn't
from
hear a
David.
band. Did you hear a band?
Marine band.
Marine band. Oh yeah, we had a marine band apparently.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, you never know what's going to happen over here. You know, this is Boston.
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 You're putting too much emphasis on "bah."
On the bois. Yeah, it's not bois. It's
It's like
Boston.
a sheep.
I don't know what to do with an O if I don't say bar.
No.
Oh,
Boston.
Boston. I don't know. Dana needs to do it. I think Jeff and I are screwing
Dana.
up too.
Tell us how you
It's Boston.
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 Oh, come on.
Boston.
STON.
BAHSTIN. Boston.
BAH.
Boston.
Yeah, Boston.
Yeah.
Boston.
I just hope that tomorrow I remember where I parked my car.
Yeah.
Is it over in Harvard Yard?
Like it.
Harvard. Say
Much
it
too
again.
subtle for these guys.
Harvard Yard.
They don't do subtle.
Over there in Harvard Yard.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh, it's getting late.
It is getting late.
Yeah, I am sleeping.
Hey, we
Yeah, you need to go past Steph's bedtime.
What's that?
What'd you say?
I'm going to take Mike out for something to eat and drink. Yeah.
It's gonna get me drunk and take advantage of me.
Uh-oh.
I don't blame him.
Well, have fun, kids.
Yeah, you guys have a good time.
I was trying to find out where the crew are. Which actually, they're a really nice bunch of young, vivacious ladies, and I'm
Clearly out of your league.
They're probably going to tell you somewhere different from where they are.
Yeah, they probably are.
You know what I'm going to do? Thank you, everybody in the chat room. You guys are all awesome.
We love you.
Well, most of you.
Yeah,
We love some of you.
Yeah, some of you maybe.
We're not going to tell you which ones though. Just going to leave you.
You know, some of you are our favorites, and the rest of you, no.
All of you, those of you with paranoid tendencies, yeah, it's
Yeah.
you.
It's you.
You're the ones we don't like.
Help me, the paranoids are after me.
Anyway, we do love you, as Steph said, and we hope to see you again the next time we do this thing.
Are we going to do it again? Oh,
I think so.
gosh.
Yeah. I don't think this is the last show. Maybe it was. I don't know. Really never.
I feel like we'll never really know when the last show's going to be. Someday it'll just be the end.
I'll get hit by a bus
The
tomorrow.
last one will die.
All at the same time.
At the same time. It could happen.
That'd be unfortunate.
With us just coming up, that is a real possibility.
Yeah, that's true. We might be the ones driving it.
It might be one some appalling RV crash.
All right. Well, I'm going to stop the broadcast. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for coming along.